The story begins with a guy named Zhou Yuan. Recently, he got the opportunity to take an internship at Chongyuan Company, which was a good chance for him. But the status of a junior employee does not allow him to relax. Everyone considers it their job to give them some dirty work, like making them coffee. Zhu Wen has no choice but to run all the errands, even if it's hard. At the moment, poor Yuan is standing in the kitchen, making a cup of coffee for another employee. As the automatic coffee machine brewed the drink, Yuan reflected that this wasn't what he expected from being an intern, and everyone treated him with disrespect. But his thoughts were interrupted by a pretty girl who gave him advice to refuse such people, otherwise they will always use it. Yuan was embarrassed and accepted her advice. This girl's name was Xiao Ruoxin, a senior in the company and a senior in the same university. She was very helpful to Yuan during the internship. But when he was distracted, the coffee in the glass spilled over the edge, directly onto Yuan's hand, which burned him. Half of the drink got on his pants, and Xiao Ruoqin offered to help clean up the stain. Yuan was very embarrassed by this suggestion and could have done it himself, but Ruoqin dissuaded him. After all, she is not a stranger to him. From this angle, Yuan could clearly see Xiao Ruoqin, which made him even more confused, but he tried not to look. At this point, the boss once again asked Yuan to distribute gifts to each department in honor of the Autumn Festival. Yuan doesn't understand why he should be doing this, but the boss only makes excuses for training the trainee. Ruoqin offered to go along with Yuan to help, but the man refused and sent her to prepare materials for the meeting. She leaned over to Yuan and offered to take him somewhere fun later. The man slammed the gift bag into Yuan's face. After this, the package could not resist and fell to the ground, scattering the boxes all over the floor. Yuan understood that the man did this on purpose, but the employee threw all the blame on him. While Yuan dutifully picked up the fallen gifts, the man looked down at him, thinking that this guy wouldn't get anywhere. As the employee walked away, looking after him, Yuan knew that he was targeting him, and if it wasn't for the money, he would have been angry by now. At that moment, the phone in his pocket vibrated. It was an unknown advertisement that talked about the chance to rise up and get a good life. Yuan was confused by this suggestion, but decided not to think about it and just download. But when he clicked on the download button, the phone lit up and otherworldly effects began to appear. In the nook between the houses, a yellow portal appears. A Yuan drops out of this portal, and when he landed painfully with the gift, he couldn't understand what had happened. Before he knew it, he heard strange noises behind him. When he turned, he saw a huge crowd of dead people coming over the fence right at him. Yuan crouched down and didn't understand how there could be zombies here. After his question, a system pops up out of nowhere that tells you about the apocalyptic tycoon system, where you can earn gold and crystals and exchange them for real money. Time travel allows you to move between the real world and the world of the apocalypse, but only once every 12 hours. After reading this information, Yuan realized that he was given a special opportunity to earn money. But before he could be happy, the fence that held the huge horde of zombies fell to the ground with a crash. Nothing stops the dead now. As soon as Yuan realized the whole problem of the situation, the crowd of zombies poured down on him in a huge wave. Not forgetting to grab the gift, he pulled with all his might. Not understanding what was wrong with his luck, as Yuan ran away from the dead, he screamed for help, hoping that someone would hear his pleas. Suddenly, he heard a voice. It was a strange girl who boldly threw grenades into a crowd of terrifying walking dead. After landing from their jump, the grenades exploded on a massive scale, scattering the crowd in seconds. Yuan was quick to thank his heroine, but it turned out that this was her job to kill zombies around the settlement. And thanks to Yuan's running around, she didn't need to kill them one at a time. He didn't know how to thank her, so he only offered her a gift that he had already taken with him to the portal. It contained a mooncake, but she had no idea what it was. The stranger decided to take it and try. Her reaction was quite vivid, which caught Yuan off guard. But then she confessed that it was very delicious, which Yuan didn't expect. The girl could not eat such delicious food for free because it is not customary here, so she handed the guy gold for a mooncake. Yuan didn't expect such a large payment. After advising her to raise the price, she was about to leave, but Yuan decided to introduce himself after the stranger, in response asking her name. Turning around, waving her tail, the stranger introduced herself as Lin Sun. Yuan came to the market, where people sold various goods, from weapons to ordinary products. Yuan also sat there, selling his mooncakes, copying the speeches of the others. As soon as he had time to start selling, a crowd of people immediately ran up, who were interested in his sweets. People had never seen a mooncake after the apocalypse, so they immediately asked for the price. Yuan happily named the price of 1 gram of gold, which surprised the public. It's not expensive at all. But the guy immediately corrected that this price is for 1 gram of mooncake. The man immediately got angry, because it is too expensive and no one will buy it. Yuan was not stupid and began to talk about the importance of life, and that if you do not eat it now, then never again. This reason immediately persuaded me to try a strange pie. So the man handed me 50 grams of pie and asked me to cut off half of it. The guys in the back were judging him for making such an unwise purchase because mercenaries like to spend money. After one bite, the mercenary felt his taste buds come to life again. This fine taste made him hand out another 100 grams of yuan to cut off two halves of different flavors. In honor of the first customer, Yuan decided to give him an extra 10 grams. Such experiences motivated other passers-by to crowd in and buy the pie in different quantities. Everyone who tasted at least a bite immediately fell in love with this sweet taste. At this rate, it was late afternoon. Yuan was surprised at his earnings. He earned about 60 grams of gold in one day. Such earnings for a couple of months can cover his usual salary for 2 or 3 years. But suddenly, a gruff male voice behind me ordered him not to move. A strange man held a knife to Yuan's side and said that he had been watching him all day, and if he gave up the gold, he would be spared. Yuan didn't know what to do or whether to give him all the gold he earned, but while the guy was thinking about a plan of action, the man had the idea to kill him anyway, leaving no witnesses. To Yuan's delight, at this crucial moment, the system issued an ability cooldown notification, allowing him to go back in time to reality. Yuan immediately issued a return order. The thief tried to stab him with a knife, but Yuan managed to run into the portal at that moment. The man stood in a stupor, not understanding where the guy had gone. The portal put the location on Yuan's house. Yuan rejoiced at his good fortune, or else he would be dead right now. When he came to his senses, he mightily picked up the pieces of gold that he had obtained by selling only a few cakes. He has a full 12 hours to prepare the goods. Morning comes, the trainee's normal life is back again. Nothing changes. The day begins with a reprimand from the boss because yesterday he did not distribute the gifts that were given to him. But the yuan changed a lot overnight. Now, he was able to say no to the requests of his boss and came to this company to grow and not to be a courier. As soon as he has completed a step, another employee asks Yuan to make him a coffee. But he refuses because he has more important things to do. The man approached the boss, not understanding why even the intern treated him disrespectfully. But the boss takes it calmly. As he watched the new Yuan leave, he knew that he would find a way to take revenge. After walking a couple of meters, Yuan met Ruoqin around the corner, who was observing the situation and wondered how he suddenly became so cocky. Yuan blushed and hinted at the help of her advice from yesterday. But he knew that it was all about the money he earned. Looking at his watch, he knew it was time. The portal appeared in the middle of the steppe and mountains. Since the last time the house point was not set, Yuan had bought a lot of cans of stew, so he would definitely earn a lot of money, but after looking around, he couldn't figure out where he was. He started shouting, asking if anyone was around, and someone took him by the shoulder. As he turned, he realized that it was not a man, but a new crowd of dead people. Time to run. But this time, it was very difficult for him to run because of the weight of the backpack, so it was likely that they would be able to catch up with him. Yuan realized that he needed to lose weight and started opening cans of stew. He threw the can at a horde of zombies to keep them away from him. Chunks of beef flew to the ground, and the dead men attacked the meat. After running away, he sat down to rest, disappointed in his large loss of goods. Not having time to breathe, the zombies again approached. Yuan realized that they were only interested in human meat, so he had no choice but to fight. He opened the system in search of gold exchange opportunities and found a way to exchange 100 grams of gold for 100 points, which gave him the right to acquire basic combat skills. Without hesitation, he immediately purchased them. At the moment of purchase, suddenly, a zombie attacked him. But Yuan cleverly used his new fighting skills and kicked the dead man. He was ready to fight, and they made him lose a lot of money today. After a while, two men handed him a blue crystal. He's not sure if he should take such expensive items. It turns out that in this way, the man thanked Yuan for saving his brother's life. The man held out another handful of white crystals, which weren't that expensive, but could cover gas and ammunition. Yuan thought that being a zombie hunter was more dangerous, but also more profitable. Thinking about it, the man slapped Yuan on the shoulder and invited him to join them. Because he knows how to fight, Yuan decided not to give an answer yet. Another guy explains that the captain has a habit of pulling everyone into their group. The captain offers to give Yuan a ride to the nearest village, even if he doesn't agree to join. They got in the car and drove off. On the way, while the other guy was sleeping next to him, Yuan was looking at an interesting blue crystal that may have a different energy inside, which gives a different effect. The system detected the presence of a crystal in the guy's hands and offered to exchange the corpse crystal for points. After ordering the exchange team, the crystal began to disperse in his hands and exchange for a sum of 100 points. Yuan was delighted. Such a small stone contains the equivalent price of 100 grams of gold. But the system issued another notification that Wu Yuan was carrying a lot of items and offered to purchase 1 square meter of space for 100 points. Yuan was glad that with this purchase, he wouldn't need to carry everything on his own. The captain passed through a refugee camp, after which there is a settlement, a refugee camp. Children and women were lying on the ground, begging passers-by to give them some food. Wen noticed a little girl standing in front of another person's car. She also started begging for food, as she was starving to death. But before she could say more than a few words, a bullet hit her in the chest. A man from the same car shot at her, telling her to get out of the way and not get the car dirty. Yuan saw all this and couldn't just watch, but the guy took him by the shoulder and reassured him, because in such a world they live, where the strong determines the fate of the weak and there are absolutely no laws. Yuan could only thank for the reminder by watching the girl bleed to death, and it gave him the motivation to become stronger, otherwise he would be the first to die. The captain, driving up to the guard, informs that the passage requires passing a test and having a pass. The guard knew the captain exactly by sight and asked how he was doing while the man handed out his pass. This question gave him the opportunity to ask for a pass for his new friend Yuan, which the guard cannot refuse the captain. They got inside the village. Yuan was given a pass and it was time to say goodbye. After thanking them for their help, the captain and his brother got ready to go to their village, but they promised to meet again. Taking out the stew from his inventory, Yuan prepared to sell it. Yuan compared himself to a character from a movie and was ready to make a pot of gold out of a can of stew. After reaching the village, Yuan immediately followed the market where people were selling various things, even alcohol before the apocalypse. Even if there is an apocalypse in the world, people are still willing to sell things for unrealistic prices. Yuan didn't even have time to look around when a man blocked his path. He thought that Yuan looked rich, so he started offering to buy his gun. Yuan did not understand and thought that the man was robbing him in the middle of the day with a gun. But the seller immediately convinced him. The guy did not fully understand why exactly he was offered to buy a gun. In fact, the man noticed that he came with hunters and thought that he would also need a weapon. Yuan was surprised that it was possible to sell weapons publicly here, and everyone had to have at least one. The man started offering weapons at a discount, only 20 blue crystals. But the Yuan broke it off. He doesn't have any. The seller hoped that he had at least some gold, but he was disappointed again. He would have given his gun for 200 potatoes, but he didn't even have that. The man realized that he had contacted the poor man and was already ready to drive him out of the store. But Yuan decided to change his mind, taking out a can of stew from his bag, which at that time was worth its weight in gold, which immediately changed the seller's opinion of the guy. After gaining respect, Yuan was willing to teach him manners. He opened a jar of delicious beef with a loud click. The smell pierced the man's nostrils and he was ready to give anything from his gun shop for 5 cans. Yuan immediately accepted such a lucrative offer. After receiving the gun, Yuan asked where he could buy ammunition. The man explained that even if the law does not prohibit the sale of weapons, the sale of ammunition can only take place in an ammunition depot. After finishing the call, Yuan immediately went to the ammunition depot, where there was already a queue. After waiting for his turn, Yuan asked for ammunition for his gun, and the price was 10 rounds for 1 gram of gold. Yuan was very surprised by such a large price, but the girl from the ammunition depot claims that bullets can save a life. But if it's too expensive, then he may not buy it. Yuan took out a gold bar and asked with a malicious smile how many rounds of ammunition he could get for it. Surprised by his wealth, the girl handed him boxes of ammo. But in addition to the ammo, the girl took out a card with her number so that Yuan could contact her if he needed ammo or anything else. Looking at the card, he realized that in this world, as long as you have money, you can buy anything. The ability time was already running out, so it was time to go home. Already at Yuan's house. Now, having bought weapons, he can fight off zombies. He didn't sell that many cans today, so he should consider expanding the business. While thinking, someone knocked on Yuan's door, but he was more concerned about the gun that lay in the middle of the house. It turns out that it was Ruqin outside the door. Yuan hurriedly started hiding his gun, trying to keep her out of the door. He decided to hide the last gun under the bed. After hiding all the weapons, he ran over and opened the door for her. Ruqin was indeed standing there, and Yuan wondered what had brought her here. She replied that she had prepared too much food, so she decided to bring him some. Ruqin asked curiously why it took him so long to open the door. Yuan decided to lie that he just cleaned up a little. Yuan started putting the containers of Ruqin's food in the refrigerator, thinking that not only was she a beauty, but she was also a good cook. While simultaneously dreaming about what would happen if he married her, he imagines coming home after a hard day's work, where Ruqin meets him at home, offering to eat or take a bath. After stopping daydreaming, he turned his attention to Ruqin, asking if she could find anything indecent in the men's room. Yuan makes the excuse that he is a pure-hearted person, so she won't find anything, nervous that she might find a weapon in such a small space. Turning around, Ruqin noticed something shiny sticking out from under the bed. Yuan's heart nearly stopped beating, and there was no way she could see the gun. To stop her, he reached out abruptly. Without calculating his strength, Yuan accidentally fell on top of Ruqin, both of them blushing in shame. He immediately stood up, justifying himself with Ruokin's mesmerizing beauty. Ruokin said nothing terrible, but her face was still flushed. Getting out of bed, she headed for the door, saying that this was normal behavior for young guys. Yuan was sure that Ruokin would hate him now and decided to see her off properly. But at the last moment, the girl looked out from behind the door and admitted that she was pleased to hear the compliment. After that, Ruokin slammed the door and left the apartment. Yuan couldn't believe what had just happened, but this wasn't the time to think about it, because it would soon be time to teleport to another world, and he needed to prepare properly. Yuan went to the store, thinking that it was worth buying for sale in the apocalyptic world. But you cannot sell products in short supply. It can attract a lot of attention. Walking down the street, he came across a seller of cheap potatoes, which are also valued in the other world. He came up with the idea that if he sells potatoes, the demand will be high. But the profit is not so big, and there will be no suspicion in his direction. He immediately approached the man to ask about the price. The man admitted that this year he had very few sales, so he offers potatoes at a 20% discount. Yuan immediately agreed to buy, and the seller asked how much he wanted to buy. Yuan immediately replied that he was ready to buy all the potatoes he had, but it would be difficult for him to carry them home, so he asked the seller about it. In a surprise for Yuan, after his words, the humble grandfather turned into a strong man, which can still do a lot. After the delivery, Yuan doubted his decision and realized that it was worth checking the amount of potatoes. There was too much of it, and the whole apartment was littered with potatoes. The case is again transferred to the market inside the settlement. Yuan came and wanted to try to start selling potatoes and see the benefits. On his way, he met a blacksmith. He actually hand-forged weapons and sold them. Yuan decided to approach the master and asked if they bought his silver weapons instead of submachine guns. The master explained that compared to a shotgun, it doesn't require repairs or replenishment of ammunition, and that its sound doesn't attract zombies in the area. After thinking about it, Yuan realized that he was right about something, and maybe he should buy a hand weapon since he could learn techniques. Taking one of the weapons, the guy specified what he was selling his products for, and the master replied that he was ready to exchange only for delicious food. Yuan decided to offer him a potato, knowing that he would probably refuse, but the master immediately examined the potato and it was beautiful, compared to the others, because Yuan brings food from another world. These potatoes brought back wonderful memories, so he was willing to trade them for a better gun. The master offered a katana that was soaked in corpse crystals, which gives extra damage to zombies. The best of his work? It was very sharp and Yuan wondered if it would be useless after a couple of blows. But the master convinced him that because of the crystals embedded in the blade, it absorbed the blood of zombies for self-healing, and each kill made the katana sharper. Yuan made a very good deal by exchanging a bag of potatoes for a cool katana. By opening a point store in the system, buying the basic skill of the dagger skill for 100 points. After the successful purchase, Yuan went to the forest in the settlement area, holding a katana in his hands. But his walk was knocked down by a crowd of zombies coming from behind. Yuan was about to open his katana, knowing that the zombies didn't know who they were messing with. With just a single movement, the weapon sliced through the two dead men. The entire blade was covered in zombie blood. Sure enough, the katana's blade was sharper because of the kill. Now he's sure it was the perfect deal. Yuan crouched down, looking at the zombie's body, when he heard gunshots from afar. After picking up the blue crystal for the murder, he began to look around. A flying bullet hits the zombie's face. A girl with a gun in her hand complains about cheap single-level crystals that don't even cover the cost of ammunition. During her monologue, a terrifying zombie with a long tongue runs in from the side. She points the gun at him, happy that a second-level zombie might help her pay off a little. After shooting him a couple of times, the dead man didn't show any reaction. The girl realized that he was invulnerable to such weak bullets, and she needed a stronger weapon. But suddenly, the zombie with its long tongue grabs her hand, which contains a clip. The clip falls out of her hands in fear and she can't break free. The dead man grabs the girl and ties her up like ropes, preventing her from even moving. She was very disgusted. The girl began to struggle and squirm, screaming for help. A Yuan appears out of nowhere, warning of its strike. In one fell swoop, he sliced through the vile creature's tongue with his new katana. The zombie howled in pain, a nasty green liquid that looked like blood pouring out of its tongue. Yuan decided to take advantage of this moment and deal with the monster forever. But suddenly, the dead man's tongue grows like a new one, which the hero did not expect. The tongue deftly wraps around the katana and does not allow you to strike. The zombie throws the sword aside. Yuan screams at the loss of his weapon. The dead man begins to laugh at his insidiousness and meanness, but at the moment of self-congratulation, he gets a few more bullets all over his body. Yuan appears with a huge gun in his hands and a sly smile in all his teeth, rejoices at the presence of firearms as well. This time, the zombie died completely, and after taking the corpse crystal from the body, Yuan was satisfied with the loot from the second-level zombie. The ammo was well spent, After winning, he remembered the girl who was injured by that monster. He ran over to her, who was lying on the ground in helplessness, asking her how she was feeling. The stranger was lying unconscious, and the monster's saliva was a poison that burns through the skin, and he rather needed to help her. Yuan carried the girl to the nearest river. The girl slowly began to recover. When she finally woke up, she found that she was missing her outer clothing. Naturally, this led to a complete misunderstanding. From behind, she saw Yuan, also without his outer clothing. He noticed that she was awake and decided to introduce himself. But the girl did not listen, and a little not understanding the situation, immediately began to throw stones. Deftly catching the stone with his hand, Yuan explained all the events, and that if he hadn't washed the poison off her body, she would have been dead. The girl was embarrassed to find out that he had touched her, but the yuan only affected the upper part. The stranger was worried, because he saw something that he shouldn't have. Yuan decided to offer 2 potatoes as compensation, which made the girl furious that her body was being treated like 2 potatoes. She claims that even if she was dying, she wouldn't eat it. But after a couple of moments, her opinion instantly changes because of the excellent taste. Yuan suggested further improving the taste of ordinary potatoes and suggested the Chinese hot sauce, Lao Gang Di. The girl was surprised because this sauce no longer existed. The girl could not believe that she would be able to taste it, because since the beginning of the apocalypse, it was over, because it was very tasty. After taking a bite of the potato along with the sauce, the taste became even twice as good. From the girl's words, Yuan thought that since all the factories stopped working, it might be a good way to earn money. The girl asked if he could sell the remaining sauce that he had, but he was willing to give it to a girl for nothing. She was very surprised by his generosity, but she found it very suspicious. Such a jar of sauce costs at least 10 pieces of gold, and he is ready to give it for nothing. Yuan asked if she wanted to continue eating the same delicious food. The girl immediately agreed, but she didn't have that much money to exchange for food. Yuan decided to offer her another exchange, such as her body. The girl immediately pushed the guy away with a loud refusal. She immediately became fiercely protective of her body, knowing that selling it for food was a terrible thing. But Yuan convinced her otherwise because that wasn't what he meant. He wanted to say that if she worked for him, he would give her food and supplies. The girl immediately started to get angry at Yuan for choosing such a choice of words. She was willing to work for him, but nothing more. Of course, Yuan immediately began to introduce himself. There was a picture of a girl in a bunny suit in his head, but she was also ready to bring him back to reality. Grabbing him by the neck, he immediately started apologizing for his thoughts. After that, they set off again, and Yuan knew that there were only low-level zombies around the market, and they wouldn't be of much use. The girl shared her knowledge about zombies and said that their maximum level is the 9th. But recently there have been more and more zombies of the 3rd level. Yuan had never heard of such a thing, and he thought that the 8th level was the highest. And where could the 9th come from? She explained that the 9th level is special because there are both weak 1st-level zombies and monsters that surpass the 8th. As Yuan walked through the market, he smelled a strange and disgusting smell. It turned out that due to the lack of water, people used to wash once a week or two. Yuan decided to clarify whether she was in favor of such a choice. Immediately embarrassed by such a tricky question, she convinced him that she regularly goes to the river to wash up. Yuan admitted that he was only joking. And at that moment, an unknown girl called out to them. She called Shuno over, who his new companion was supposed to be, and asked him to look at her new designs. Shuno was worried that the Hungry Wolf Gang was coming again, but they still didn't have anything to take away. Suddenly, the girl felt ill, and at one point she faints. Yuan picks it up, wondering how it feels. The girl admits that she is very hungry. The guy hands her a potato and offers her something to eat, and her eyes light up with happiness. As the girl cheers over the potato, Yuan asks Shuno who the stranger is. Shuno calls her a neighbor, and before she can finish, she is interrupted. After the meal, she finds the strength to introduce herself. Her name is Wenwen, and she is a programmer. But Shuno breaks off Wenwen because the world no longer has the internet, and all her devices will not be useful. She knows that Shuno is right. Whatever good program she makes, it's not even worth a couple of potatoes here. Yuan interrupts their conversation and motivates her to continue to study and make programs because he is interested and even ready to buy, at least for a can of beans. He knew that even if the end of the world was coming here, their technology was much better than in his world, and there are talented people here who can give him a new opportunity to earn extra money. Wenwen holds out a device that looks like a USB stick, which contains all the information for the encyclopedia of the end of the world program that she has collected over the years. All the necessary data about monsters, geography, and so on is collected there. She also knows how to do analysis. Yuan was surprised by the importance of this program, but Wenwen understood that this was an unfinished product and she needed more time and manpower to complete it. Junuo's words seemed right and she was ready to give up on this matter. The guy did not give up and clarified whether she could find people to complete the project if he provided her with food and security. The girl unconditionally agreed. She even has friends programmers. For the meal, all the research results will belong to him. Yuan agreed to these terms. The girl was moved by this opportunity to continue doing what she loved. Juno envied this suggestion. If it was offered to her, she would also be able to find people to help her hunt zombies. But her monologue was interrupted by Yuan, who suggested that she find enough people to join their clan, and then he would provide her with everything she needed and even put her as a leader. The girl's eyes lit up and she couldn't believe it. Out of happiness, she threw herself into his arms, which he didn't expect. Reaching out, she hugged him tightly with a bright smile on her face. Right after that, she immediately ran off to look for people in the clan, promising that she would return with a crowd, leaving the guy confused. Sure enough, half an hour later, she returned with a group of people. Yuan decided to ask if these were the hunters she had found. Juno was incredibly proud of her search because they are very professional, especially if you feed them. Yuan informed everyone that he came from a distant land and he wouldn't lie. He is willing to pay for his work with food, and the harder he works, the more food he gets, ostentatiously pouring out a huge bag of potatoes. During his speech, a couple of hunters whispered about the cowardice of such heroes, and they are sure that when they meet zombies, they can urinate in their pants. And the second one offered to pick up food and leave. But at that moment, a bullet flies between their heads, which leaves a mark on the tree behind. The Yuan warned that bad consequences will be expected for attempts to cheat. After receiving the potatoes, they were ready to follow him anywhere. Yuan ordered that everything was up to them, and now was the time to buy equipment. At this moment, in the forest between the trees, two zombies were walking by the hands, because even in this world they have rights. But their romantic date was interrupted by silver bullets that took off their heads. This was Yuan's team that was willing to kill anyone for their boss. While collecting blue crystals from the corpses, Yuan advised to shoot only at the heads, so as not to waste extra bullets. Suddenly, a huge man with a big belly comes out of the bushes, who is a member of the Hungry Wolves gang, and he was against the fact that strangers were shooting on their territory. He noticed Shu Nuo and immediately recognized her. After all, he had warned her last time. But this time, she wasn't alone at all. The rest of the Hungry Wolf horde arrived and taunted the Yuan gang, offering to hand over their weapons and then they would spare them. Yuan was overconfident. All he said was that it was very rude to talk to a person with a gun pointed at them. And for that, I decided to teach them a lesson with my katana. But they didn't believe that melee weapons could be faster than firearms. Before he could blink, the katana went through his wrist. The katana cut off his wrist in an instant, and he screamed in pain. Pointing the blade in their direction, with the gang behind him, Yuan ordered to tell their boss that the refugees would no longer be humiliated. But even after losing his arm, he was prepared to threaten that the boss of the Hungry Wolves gang might summon mutant zombies that would kill them in agony. Turning around in disgrace, they were about to leave and report everything to their boss, but Yuan decided to stop them. The guy was shaking with fear, because this is just a fight between gangs, and you can't just cut something off here. Yuan decided not to leave without a reward, and ordered them to hand over everything they had. The guy took it as a humiliation, and was ready to die if only their gang would not be ridiculed. But after a moment, they all carefully put their things together, and begged them not to be killed. Yuan accepted their belongings as payment for their past attacks on the weak, and gave them the opportunity to escape. It's already dark, and the action shifts to the Hungry Wolves base. The guy sat on his knees in front of the leader, and recounted the events. He said that the guy occupied their territory and called the leader useless. Standing up from his throne, the boss said that it wasn't worth attacking people without realizing the consequences. Placing a hand on the guy's shoulder, the leader said that he naturally wouldn't let go of a person who treated their clan without respect. The guy was ready to hear the revenge plan. But before that, the leader was ready to get rid of him, because he doesn't need people who are willing to give up all their equipment without even trying to fight back. The guy trembled in fear, trying to justify himself. But at this moment, the boss turned into a huge wolf and destroyed the guy with one bite. Meanwhile, things were booming in the Yuan gang and they decided to celebrate. Yuan praised his entire staff and allowed them to eat and drink as much as they liked, as long as he paid for everything. Everyone was happy and started getting drunk and eating too much. But gradually, everyone started to leave. It was already morning. Empty alcohol bottles are scattered around the bed. Yuan woke up, his head aching from yesterday's events. But before he could open his eyes, he was confused by someone else's hand next to him. To Yuan's surprise, it was Shu Nuo, who even in her sleep was talking about continuing the evening. Shu Nuo opened her eyes, saying that it had been a long time since she had been so drunk. She sat up, rubbing her eyes from sleep, and Yuan was shocked by what was happening. It wasn't until Shu Nuo was fully awake that she realized the situation. She was immediately enraged, and the first question she asked was what Yuan did yesterday, even though he doesn't remember anything either. At the moment of their argument, Wenwen comes in to tell Yuan that the program he requested is over. But when she walked in, she only saw Zhu. No, sitting on top of the guy. Out of sheer absurdity, she decided to ask if she was interrupting. The guys immediately started making excuses that this wasn't what she thought it was and there was nothing going on between them. Wenwen just giggled because she knew that. They were both very drunk and there was only one bed in the tent, so she decided to put them together. But Juno didn't understand why they were both naked. Wenwen took it off because they were too drunk and started throwing up everywhere. Juno is angry and knows that she did it on purpose. Wenwen handed over the flash drive and said that the program is as easy to use as possible. Anyone can figure it out. Yuan thought that she took him for a fool, even though he also has a basic knowledge of programming. Wenwen only pretended that she didn't mean it, but she was interested in what her program would be useful for at the end of the world. Yuan just grinned and asked me to trust him. Moving back to the real world, the case moves to the office. The boss again throws Yuan dirty work and asks him to finish it before the end of the day, or his bonus will be reduced. In fact, this was his plan. He didn't believe that an intern could finish a week's worth of paperwork in one night. Suddenly, someone approaches Yuan from behind. It was Ruoqin who noticed the amount of work and immediately offered her help. Yuan was embarrassed and refused. He could handle it on his own. She asked him to call her if he needed help. Ruoqin left. Yuan took out the flash drive with the program that Wenwen had made and was ready to check it out. Only when he started the program did he immediately see how fast it was executing processes. It can even complete the job in a couple of minutes. This program can even hack other people's computers, and Yuan decided to check what people are doing in the office. King looked at the girls again. But then, he noticed that Chief Lin Xiong was communicating with employees from the enemy company. Yuan realized that this was a good opportunity to teach his annoying boss a lesson. 2 hours later, an exasperated Lin Xiong comes out and orders all the interns to stay in the office, because he needs to conduct an inspection. All the poor trainees no longer expected to get home today. They don't even get paid extra for extra working hours. But Yuan, who had plucked up the courage, turned to Lin Xiong, asking if it was ethical to force other employees to do his personal paperwork. Lin Xiong immediately started making excuses because there was no proof. After saying this, Yuan throws down a folder of papers, telling everyone to take a look for themselves. The guys began to look at the scattered papers, which confirmed the completion of tasks for the enemy company, which for some reason was performed by other employees. The boss was full of confidence in their status. After all, they are only interns, and he has the right to give them extra work. But then, the chief appeared behind Lin Xiong, who was already holding the evidence of his betrayal in his hands. Lin Xiong immediately started making excuses to the chief. Naturally, no amount of excuses will help him clear his reputation. The boss says that he will try to be fair to them, and that earlier the company hired new people. But Yuan has already submitted his resignation, and he doesn't want to work in a company full of corrupt officials. All the trainees followed Yuan and left the company. Only the chief and Lin Xiong remained in the office. Because of Lin Xiong's mistake, they had lost a lot of people just when they needed them the most. The chief ordered him to write a letter of resignation, causing Lin Xiong to fall to his knees. After leaving the building, Yuan apologized to everyone, as it was originally just a problem between him and Lin Xun, and he didn't expect them to follow him. But they didn't hold a grudge, because they also wanted to leave. There is only one problem. It will be difficult for them to find a job, because other game companies are working on their own projects. But Yuan is willing to help and offer them a job at his company that he plans to open. Everyone instantly cheered up and was ready to wait for his suggestions. The next day, Yuan is back in the village. Yuan understood that reselling things is not a long and stable income. So now with the capital, he can open his own company. While he was thinking, he heard shouts of bad news. His motorcycle gang reports that Zhu No is in danger. They stopped, and Yuan let them calm down and tell them everything in order. One of them reported that when they were shopping for supplies, a group of bandits from the Hungry Wolf gang attacked them, and in order to protect Shuno's gang, they went to the forest to distract them. Yuan ordered them to go to the base and call for help while he went to rescue her. He got on his motorcycle and rode off, realizing how annoying these hungry wolves were. Meanwhile, Suno is driving a car through the woods. People from the gang are chasing her on motorcycles. She can't tear herself away from them. But then, they finally surrounded her. A man from the gang turned to her. They were already ready to take her to their boss. But suddenly, the car exploded. They hadn't expected this turn of events. Not understanding the cause of the explosion, they began to look around until one of them was hit in the face by a suspicious toy. The second guy realized that this is not a simple toy but a bomb. And at that moment, his friend's head exploded. A cute girl appeared on the horizon that didn't understand how they could hurt a single girl. Taking Chica off the grenade, she threw it into the crowd of guys with a sinister face. She loves blowing up bad guys. The guys exploded in one big pile. The pleasure of the explosion made her blush, and she was content with the explosion. Juno ran out of the car and recognized the girl named Tina. It turned out that she was just blowing up a zombie nearby and didn't expect to meet her with her arm wrapped tightly around her. Juno thanked her for saving her life. But Tina didn't ask for thanks because Juno saved her many times before she woke up. But Juno didn't expect her to become so strong after she woke up. But suddenly, a silhouette appeared behind a tree that didn't expect to meet the awakened one. Coming out from behind the tree, it turned out to be the leader of the Hungry Wolves gang, Scar. He was very happy about this chance. Abruptly, he is grabbed by the leg. It was a dying member of his gang who needed to be rescued. But Scar only responded with a hard kick. He noticed Tina, and she interested him, and he offered her to join his gang, promising her eternal food and drink. Tina put on a sweet face and agreed that the Hungry Wolves gang was rumored to be very good, but she wanted to put it to the test. Her bombs instantly blew up the leader and she took it for a victory. But the boss is not so simple, and only announces the start of the game, flying out of the explosion of its bombs. A woman's cry filled the forest. Wen immediately recognized Shuno's voice and saw that something was burning in the trees. He tried to drive as fast as possible, and suddenly, he stops with a look of shock on his face. His face froze in unpleasant surprise. Scar had already destroyed Tina and Shuno, and reported that the hero was too late to save his princess. Wen got aggressive. The leader was as confident as ever, thinking that there was no one stronger than him. Wen rushed to strike. And surprisingly, he did it. The strongest leader flew into a tree. Yuan immediately ran to Shuno's side, looking at her condition. Even in this state, Shuno kept her pride high, even though it was the second time she had been beaten. Scar rose up after being hit by Yuan and became interested in him. But he wasn't ready to accept defeat, so he decided to fight again. He reached for the punch to assess the Yuan's strength. Yuan realized that this guy was quite fast. The leader started throwing rocks with terrible force, and Yuan could only dodge. He realized that he needed to put all his strength into this battle, because this person has unrealistic speed and strength. Yuan decided to use the improved combat capabilities. With tears in his eyes, he gave everything he had prepared for the opening of his company. He had spent almost all of his points on the upgrade, and he could feel it getting stronger. Scar was ready to take it out with a final blow because it was too weak for him. But Yuan stopped his kick with one hand. The leader didn't understand how he did it. Yuan was now ready to fight to the fullest. With just a single movement, he flipped the leader's huge carcass to the ground. From such a powerful blow, the leader almost choked on blood. He realized that he could easily lose at this rate. Yuan threw another punch until the leader used his trump card up his sleeve. The boss's hands began to transform into powerful paws with huge claws. He tried to scratch Yuan, but Yuan managed to dodge. With great fear, he looked at the transformation of the leader. Scar turned into a huge, powerful wolf. For a human, the Yuan is strong, but it doesn't compare to the awakened one. Yuan didn't know who the awakened ones were. Wolf explained that only certain people who collected the right amount of zombie crystals could gain enough power to become stronger than humans. After finishing the performance with the awakened ones, the wolf began to attack. This time, Yuan didn't have time to react to his strike, and the wolf's claws sliced through his clothes and grazed his skin. The wolf is going to answer for that punch in the face. Yuan knew that it was dangerous to fight because there were girls lying unconscious, and it was worth distracting him first. Playing with him like a dog, Yuan prepared to play catch-up. The leader was very offended by this, and he gave chase. Distracting him, he climbed a tree and hid. The wolf had lost track of him and was calling him to fight. When the leader was distracted, Yuan jumped on him from behind and attacked, taking it as a victory. But it was stronger than he'd thought, and the wolf spun around in time for the sound. The leader grabbed him by the neck and pushed him against a tree, and he didn't want to be underestimated because his nose is 10 times stronger than a human's. But surprisingly, Yuan grinned and insisted that he had found a way to win. The wolf doesn't know what he's talking about. Yuan puffed out his cheeks. The wolf remains perplexed. Suddenly, Yuan breathed on it through his mouth. The smell was so bad that the wolf covered its muzzle with its paws and didn't understand why it smelled so bad. But Yuan explained that it was just dumplings with onion and egg and some garlic. Even humans can't stand the smell, not like a wolf. The wolf couldn't stand the smell, holding one paw to its nose while trying to cut Yuan with the other. This gave Yuan the opportunity to pick up the katana and attack. Then, in one fell swoop, he cut off half of the wolf's body. He screamed in pain. Yuan finally defeated the wolf leader using more than just physical strength. But in the wolf's corpse, he noticed a crystal, but it was rainbow-colored. Having picked up this special crystal, the system reported on the improvement and the appearance of a new skill, Zombie Lord. Yuan can now control the undead that have lost their corpse crystal. Yuan was very happy that he could now use zombies as minions. But suddenly, the system issued another notification. Yuan was given a mission: build a shelter for at least 100 people in a month. In case of failure of the mission, death is given. Yuan was wildly afraid of the punishment and thought it was too cruel, but the system said that everything is in its hands. and the player should not forget about it. Knowing that there was no escaping this, he decided to take these two girls to the base and then think through a plan of action. The time is moved to half a day. Tina came to her senses and decided to introduce herself properly. 3 years ago, she was rescued by Shu No and is now an independent zombie hunter. Wen was surprised that at this age, she could hunt zombies on her own. But Shu No asked her not to underestimate her because she is an awakened one. Yuan again forgot what that meant. Tina decided to explain. Some people do not become infected after being bitten by a zombie, but produce a special multicolored stone in their head. This crystal gives the infected person extraordinary power. Tina's ability is to turn items into bombs. To demonstrate, she turned a glass into a bomb. Throwing it out of the tent, it instantly exploded. Yuan was surprised by their capabilities and considered them invincible. But Shu No immediately refuted him. Because the awakened ones are also divided into levels, like zombies. Tina must be level 3. And the scar was about level 4. Tina confessed to Yuan that for defeating such a powerful enemy, she would follow him for the rest of her life. Yuan just agreed because her power can be used for good. And if not, then at least you can use it to fry fish. Meanwhile, Yuan didn't understand the purpose of the guys from his gang. He thought they were trying to get back at Scarface. But in reality, they are farmers from Dark Moon Farm, and their base was taken by Scar and his army, and they were very grateful to Yuan for killing him. Yuan didn't need any gratitude, so he advised them to go home and work on the farm, but they admitted that Scar's assistants were still occupying their farm, so they came to thank Captain Zhou and ask for a job. Paying for food will be even more than necessary. Yuan thought about it. He was afraid that he didn't have a fortress to set up a base, but right now, it's a good opportunity to get one. The girls were already ready to fight anyone. Meanwhile, at Dark Moon Farm, the boys were fighting for the position of the leader. But then, a voice interrupted their fight and they turned around. They recognized Yuan that had defeated their boss. If the one who hits harder becomes the boss, then Yuan would like to join in. With a leap, he jumped down from the height and joined them in the battle for the top job. Tina decides to have some fun too. Her bombs easily blow up a crowd of people. The true owners of the farm also decided to help Captain Zhou win back their territory. After 30 minutes, there were no living enemies left. Yuan reports victory over enemies and now the real owners of the farm can take it back. But even with Scar's victory and death, there will be other invaders coming to the farm. So they would like to transfer the leader status of Dark Moon Farm to Yuan and be under his leadership. Yuan was energized by this idea. Now they were ready to eat and fight. All the people supported his idea. The system identified the emergence of a shelter under the leadership of the Yuan and recorded general statistics. The number of people in the farm reached 43, but the levels of all categories were small. To increase each of them, the Yuan needs points. In the end, the Yuan still lacks crystals and gold. But then Wenwen shows up, announcing the discovery of the Hungry Wolves safe, which Yuan can't wait to see. Wenwen picked up the code while Yuan stood at the back. Yuan was sure that there were many treasures waiting for them there. When they opened the safe, there was indeed a huge mountain of gold and crystals waiting for them. They truly became rich. But Wenwen was beginning to worry that due to the lack of manpower, any other gang could easily take their base. Wen had an idea to solve this problem. Wen went outside and approached the corpses of the enemies. I opened the system and looked at the information about the Zombie Lord skill. After saying a special phrase, he used his skill. Glistening, blue smoke appeared above the corpses, and the corpses actually began to rise from the dead. Yuan couldn't believe that the corpses were actually coming to life. Shunuo was already prepared to deal with them, but Yuan stopped her, explaining that these zombies were actually under his control. Shu No didn't understand how this was possible. Yuan revealed that he got this ability after defeating Scar, and now he can use zombies as a free labor force. After giving them axes at his command, the zombies started chopping down trees. But they were so sloppy that they chopped off each other's heads with axes. Shu Nuo was already beginning to doubt that they could be of any help. But managing them is quite difficult, especially several at once. But Wenwen has an invention that she made earlier. Maybe it can help. She imagined a brainwave manipulator. Yuan immediately put it on and asked how to use it. Wenwen explained that there are 2 chips inside this device that can send and receive brainwaves. One chip goes to this device, and the second chip goes to the zombie's head. By placing the chip in the head of one of the dead men, it really became much easier for them, as if he was controlling his body. Yuan decided to seize the moment. The movements are very smooth, and the vision through it is absolutely clear. Zhu No didn't like the dead man's actions. Even the pain felt realistic. Yuan has an idea, but he's going to need the guy's help. The girls didn't understand what the idea was. The zombie chokes on its own blood from the shot. It's Shu No shooting down a crowd of zombies with enthusiasm. Yuan praises her efforts and asks her to record another shot. She doesn't understand why he writes down such things. But smiling, Yuan promises that she will find out later. Back on Earth, Yuan sat down at his laptop and started adding effects and transitions to the captured video. And it was ready. Finally, he puts the video on the internet. As he stretches, he doesn't know what the result of putting out such a game trailer will be. The next morning came. Yuan, who had accidentally fallen asleep on the chair, woke up and immediately got into the laptop. He yawned with exhaustion. When he went to check out the video, he didn't know if it would be a success. When he opened it, he was wildly surprised. The video has received a lot of attention and assets. Yuan continued to record the video, gathering attention around his game, calling it the end of the dark world. Her trailer has already collected more than 10 million views. 50 random commenters will get into the beta test, and everyone wants to try their luck. Meanwhile, Wang Xiaoqiao, chairman of Future Technology, is trying to find a company to create this game. It instructs all employees of the company to leave comments under video trailers in order to gain access to the closed beta. She is very interested in the game. And if it is the same as on the trailers, she will achieve great success. She is not going to miss it for anything. At the same time, Chao Yi, a retired Special Forces soldier, was watching this trailer, observing that the weapons and transports were too realistic. At the same time, a girl named Lao Tzu receives a package from a courier, which she was very much waiting for. On her desk is a reward for getting 5 million subscribers. Lao Ziji, a well-known streamer, has received a closed beta test and wants to show it to her viewers and show whether the game is of the same quality or not. Meanwhile, at the farm, Yuan completed the creation of the corpse structure. A zombie very similar to Lao Ziji appeared. Yuan compares the zombie with the photo and believes that it is exactly the same. After that, Yuan creates 50 game models. Junao wondered why Yuan changed the face of each corpse to a different one, and why he made those videos. She thought that he might have some kind of fetish, but he immediately dismissed the idea and told her to wait. His idea was to present this apocalypse in the form of a holographic simulation game, and then use the video to entice players. The corpses that he modeled should be characters after entering the game. After collecting information about every player who registered for the beta test, he used his Zombie Lord ability to make their faces look the same. Wenwen reports that all the chips are working properly, but doubts that he has found 50 people. Yuan only nervously replies that it doesn't matter and you don't have to worry. The servers will be up and running soon, and all the game helmets have already been sent. Wenwen activated the brainwave controller. Not a single person had moved yet, and Shunuo began to doubt Yuan's words. But suddenly the girl opened her eyes. Just looking around, she was already exulting at the quality of the graphics, which was stated in the trailer. Junao didn't believe that the girl had come to life. All of a sudden, the dead girl grabbed Shunuo's hand. Surprised that she was the same as she was in the trailer and how realistic it felt, Junao immediately slapped her away. But the girl even liked it, because the pain was also so realistic that it was more like a time jump. At the same time, other players began to come in and evaluate the graphics and mechanization of the game. But among the usual crowd of players, there was Wang Xiaoqiao, who was able to gain access to the closed beta. And finally convinced of this game, she is ready to cooperate with him. And even a former Special Forces soldier decided to take part in beta testing. Distracting the players, Yuan cleared his throat, drawing attention to himself. He greeted all the players in the Dark Moon hideout and introduced himself as Chief Zhou Yuan, asking if they were ready to start a new life here. Yuan was marked as the Lord of Refuge. He decided to explain to the players the rules that after death, their character disappears, and you will need to start all over again. But streamer Lao Ziji didn't want to stand still, and began to consider the realism of the NPCs in the game. Yuan couldn't understand why she approached him or what was wrong with her. In fact, she was already holding the knife behind her back. She took off, wanting to test the freedom of action in this game. But at the same time, a bullet hits her in the forehead. Her body instantly heaves after the Yuan shot. Pointing the muzzle at her, he asked the players not to die once again. Other players expressed their dissatisfaction at the expense of the hardcore nature of this world. A second later, Lao Ziji came to life again. Even after such a realistic death, she really likes this game. Yuan continued to tell the players the rules. The second rule is the prohibition of causing any harm to the NPC. You can define an NPC using the observe command. Compared to Lao Tzu, the Yuan does not have a player ID. Player Chao Yi decides to ask if it is okay not to follow these rules outside the camp. Yuan confirms his words and adds that freedom in this game is still extremely high. So if the player has enough strength, he has the right to do it. Player Wang Xiaoqiao asks how you can improve your equipment and strength. Yuan explains that by killing zombies, you can collect corpse crystals from their corpses, which can be exchanged for various attributes. It also adds that you can perform NPC tasks from the shelter, which increases the reputation of the shelter and the NPC's sympathy for the player. And reputation can also be exchanged for materials and equipment. Yuan teaches players to open the game's interface using the system command to get information about their stats. Everyone has started opening up their statistics, and Chairman Wang Xiaoqiao is interested in how the technology works. With a pistol shot, Yuan announced the start of the game and the opportunity to explore the world to the fullest. Everyone in the area recognized the famous streamer Lao Tzu and came to say hello. Lao Tzu feels confident and is ready to perform all the languid tasks in the caves just to level up faster than anyone else. Her fans didn't expect anything different from her. A crowd of zombies appears on the road, which Lao Ziji calls out loudly. It uses zombies as stepping stones to the legendary life of the best player. 3 minutes later, she and her fans find themselves back in Darkmoon's hideout, complaining about how strong these zombies are. Lao Ziji decided to approach Yuan and ask him about tasks that didn't require combat skills. Yuan offered her tasks like plowing the land, building houses, and collecting grain with a sly smile. Laozi hesitantly agreed to the task of plowing the land and had a strong feeling that she was being made into a slave. The Yuan is content while a bunch of new players are plowing through the background. Now he can use players as free labor. But he didn't expect that a player would come up behind him and want to buy new equipment. It was Chao Yi who had already collected a handful of red crystals. Yuan was shocked. He asked where he got so many corpse crystals from. He said that he just easily killed zombies and got crystals from them, but he needs better equipment. Yuan praised him for his excellent progress and decided to sell him the weapon at a discount. Former Special Forces soldier Chao Yi took the gun in his hands and rated it realistic by 10 points. Yuan promised that if he performed as well, the shelter would provide better equipment. Chao Yi would leave to continue the tasks while Yuan evaluated his skills and that they could be used in the future. While he was thinking, someone spoke to him from behind him. Chairman Wang Xiaoqiao also wanted to purchase new equipment. Yuan told her that to do this, she would need points and corpse crystals to exchange for weapons. Wang Xiaoqiao did not have either. And Yuan does not understand how she wants to get new equipment and asks not to disturb the NPCs for nothing, so as not to lower their reputation. But she wants to buy points and crystals for real money because she is sure that the game was made to suck money out of players. Yuan disappoints her that the game does not have a donation system, and all players play fairly. He understands that this is the type of player who is willing to pay for domestic currency, and this is a good opportunity to earn money, but it is too early. Wang Xiaoqiao was angry that she didn't have enough money for equipment, so she could buy his game if she really wanted to. To her surprise, Yuan reached out and hooked a finger under her chin. He informed her that her real money had no weight in this world, and that she should listen to him or face punishment, but she doesn't perceive him in any way other than as an ordinary NPC. She orders you to give her a way to fuck up, or she'll find another way. Yuan only followed her through with the basic phrase of a classic NPC and wished her luck as long as she didn't break the rules. The evil Wang Xiaoqiao didn't accept it. Xiaoqiao gathered the players and announced that she was willing to buy the corpse crystals for real money. Players immediately started offering their crystals in different amounts. Yuan realized that if you had money, you could do anything. Xiaoqiao holds out a full bag filled with crystals and exchanges them for new equipment. All the players started to complete their tasks and report back to Shu No. It made her feel a little awkward, and she could only thank them enough. For completing tasks, they began to earn points. This motivated the players even more, and they started asking for even more tasks to level up. Shu No asked them to help fix the house and collect ingredients for medicines, but she didn't understand why they were so eager to do this dirty work. 3 days later, a meeting takes place in the Darkmoon shelter. Wenwen reports that over the past 3 days, the recovery of Darkmoon Farm's refugees has been going smoothly, thanks to the help of corpse dolls who helped for a small fee. Yishu Nuo was very embarrassed that they were very energetic and doing a lot of work. They didn't get tired at all. Yuan reports that according to their development, the evacuation should soon be ready for expansion if there are no more postponed meetings. But suddenly, Wenwen asked Yuan to stay late after the meeting, and she wants to ask a question. Juno wondered why they were whispering together and joked that Wenwen wanted to tell him. Yuan asked her not to talk nonsense and leave first. When they were alone, Yuan asked her to ask what she was interested in. She decided to ask what no one had ever asked before: who was controlling the brainwaves of these dead people? Yuan realized that everyone was right. Nothing could be hidden from a smart girl like Wenwen. He decided to lie that the rich people from the settlement were behind the control, that they just wanted to have fun. Wenwen wasn't very sure of the truth of his words, but Yuan put his hand on her shoulder and begged her to believe that everything he did was for the good of the shelter and their survival. Having believed him, she was ready to use her skills and abilities to help. Shuno suddenly burst into the room, saying that she was in solidarity with Wenwen, and was also ready to use all her skills to help Yuan. Meanwhile, a row broke out on the street between an NPC and a streamer player Lao Jiezi, who broke into his house in broad daylight to steal. The girl did not understand what the problem was for the player to go through the house of an ordinary game bot and search the lockers. This is a common thing in games. Yuan broke into the argument, trying to figure out why such a crowd was gathering. A man from the settlement started trying to get justice because this stranger came to his house and took his equipment. Lao Ziji didn't understand the problem, since this game originally had the full right of freedom. Meanwhile, a poor resident complained that she had taken everything from him, including his personal underwear. She claims that she just wanted to see if she could take someone else's equipment. Yuan was only thinking about the benefits of using popular streamer Lao Ziji to promote the game. He decided to meet her in person and convince her. After some thought, Yuan declared barehanded combat to be the solution. And if Lao Ziji lost, then she would owe him double the compensation. They were both fully prepared and willing to fight. She warns that you should not underestimate her, because she has been practicing kung fu for several years. He didn't doubt her professionalism, of course, but the first and final blow was his. The man mercilessly covered Lao Ziji with his fists, which slowly took away her HP. To Yuan, the outcome of the fight was obvious. He realized that ordinary modern humans were no match for the apocalypse fighters. Completely beaten up, Lao Ziji apologized to the man and held out a large red corpse crystal. Yuan declared that this would be the case for anyone who did bad things. Meanwhile, in an internet cafe in the real world, the guys sitting at the computer in the internet cafe were watching the game evaluation from Lao Ziji, whose opinion is extremely important in the gaming world. So they were waiting for the official release of this beautiful game. The real Lao Tzu was sitting in her room at her computer. She finally finished recording the beta test of the game and uploaded it to the channel for people to watch. Unfortunately, she has run out of beer and there is no food at home from the word at all. So she's going to go to the nearest grocery store. She went to the nearest store. Lao Ziji was picking out a drink and looking for her favorite drink, thinking that it was over. But she found the last can. Grabbing onto the jar, someone also reached for it and placed a hand on top of Lao Ziji's. Looking at the stranger, there was a Yuan that decided to give up the last drink to her. She thanked the man for his kindness, but his face looked extremely familiar. When they got to know each other, they were both surprised, especially Lao Tzu, that she recognized the patron from her new game. The first time they meet, they're already banging beer bottles in her apartment. When she learns that the leader is a real person, she doesn't wonder why he's acting so strange. Yuan lied that it was to improve the gameplay, and since their company consists of a couple of people, he is trying to pass on a good example to his employees as a producer. The girl was surprised that the creator of this divine game looks like an ordinary person. In response, Yuan also didn't expect a beautiful and popular girl to lead an ordinary, measured life. Looking around her room, it was a terrible mess that didn't fit her status. But the girl assures him that her viewers love her for her skill and character, and not her face and body. Yuan thinks this is a problem, because both her appearance and her figure are good. From such words, the girl was embarrassed, but she pretended that his words meant nothing to her. He explains that these are her advantages, so she shouldn't be shy about it, thinking that if she uses it, the game will definitely become popular. Yuan decided to move on to business. Since he's conducting a survey among the players, he decided to ask if there are any possible improvements to the game. The girl complains that at the moment there is very little content in the game, and that activating dungeons will make the game much more interesting. She decided to give her advice to play her own game instead of serving players like NPCs. It really was a good idea. Thanks to her ideas, something clicked in his head, and from happiness, he suddenly hugged her. After that, he immediately left to go and improve the game. The girl was genuinely offended that he didn't even bother to ask her name, and addressed her by her nickname. Once in another world, Yuan began to activate the experiment system, which generates a level and monsters for which he can receive rewards. There are 10 levels in total. The higher it is, the more expensive the rewards will be. Yuan spent 500 points to create a level 1 experiment. After payment, experiment started the appearance process. The download was completed, and the system announced that the experiment was successfully loaded. Yuan created a portal that led to the zombie jungle experiment. The level was only the first, and the boss at the end had a second level. He hoped he hadn't wasted so many points. After being created, Yuan announced a new dungeon system that requires only 1 topaz to enter. The rewards will be generous, and everyone can participate. Players were very happy with the game's expansions. Yuan realized that Lao Ziji was right. It is worth looking at the game from the player's side to notice the shortcomings. So Yuan decided to stop being an NPC and become a regular player. He spent 100 points to use transformation, which allows him to get a new body and shape. The process of changing the Yuan has begun. Yuan had changed a lot in appearance, growing long silver hair. This system was useful, because now he could pretend to be a player. Meanwhile, Lao Ziji was already calling out to people, recruiting people for the dungeon team. She was 3 people short. Someone tugged on her shoulder from behind, inviting her to join her team. Yuan turned around and stood there, but in a new form. Lao Ziji instantly liked his appearance, which made Yuan uneasy. Even so, Yuan's face looked familiar to her. Yuan didn't know what to say, so he assumed that she might have seen him somewhere before and decided to hurry her to clear the dungeon. But just as they were about to head to the dungeon, they were interrupted by a voice. It was two third-level players who offered to join their team and share the rewards equally. Lao Ziji had too high an opinion of herself, so she couldn't make the decision to join them. Yuan didn't mind. The girl was determined to fight, and having gathered a team, she was ready to clear the dungeon. Yuan is glad that this stupid girl didn't recognize him. And in any case, there's nothing to worry about, it's just a low-level dungeon. A crowd of players approached the portal to the dungeon. There were already players who couldn't pass it. They didn't understand why it was so difficult, or if it was because of their weak equipment. But then Lao Ziji came over and said confidently, she should be the first to pass this dungeon. At this point, unfortunately for Lao Ziji, a player named Chia Yi, who was the first to complete the task, comes out of the portal. It was a bit shabby. After this, Lao Ziji froze in shock. She pretended that being the first is not so important. And this game is much deeper than just passing levels, and here you need to survive. And who needs such achievements at all? Yuan stopped the player Xia Yi. He handed him a healing tool, since it probably ran out during the dungeon's progress, and advised him to be careful with other groups. Xia Yi only thanked the stranger, but suddenly, a team member's voice could be heard from behind, complaining that Yuan shouldn't share supplies with other players, to which Yuan rudely rejected his companion's advice. Yuan's response angered the player, but the second man stepped in just in time, trying to calm him down. When everyone was ready, Lao Ziji was about to open the dungeon. After starting the task, all team players will be teleported, and in 3 seconds they will enter the dungeon. The playthrough time was 60 minutes and the goal was to kill the boss. After entering the dungeon, Lao Ziji appreciated the atmosphere inside and praised the creator for listening to her. Yuan Undercover asked if she knew the creator personally. Lao Ziji boasted that she not only knew, but also taught him a couple of things. Her bragging was interrupted by a startled team member, and he was afraid of a bunch of snakes that crept closer and closer. They opened their terrifying mouths, ready to attack with great speed. As luck would have it, Lao Tzu's main fear was snakes. Yuan was cutting snakes undercover, trying to protect the team. He advised not to be afraid of them, because they can be killed with one blow. The men took his advice and started attacking the snakes in response. Out of fear, Lao Ziji closed her eyes and held the snake tightly in her hands. Out of anger at this dungeon and such a law of meanness, she tore the snake in half with her bare hands. Yuan was disappointed in her fighting skills. One of the guys was afraid of something again, and Yuan asked what was wrong. It turns out that one of the venomous snakes managed to bite him in the arm. The guy ordered to leave him, thinking that he could not escape. But Yuan convinced him that the venom of these snakes was not so poisonous and could be sucked out. The second guy offered to help him and is ready to suck the poison on his own. He was very grateful to him. It was a very strange picture. The children couldn't look at this sight. Their eyes were burned out. Taking advantage of the moment, Lao Ziji asked Yuan to move away with her. Yuan walked away with her into the trees, not understanding what she wanted to say in private. It turns out that Lao Ziji found out that she was also bitten by a snake. Yuan was sympathetic and offered to help, because if she didn't suck out the poison, she would die within 5 minutes. The bite was right in the chest. Both of them were uncomfortable doing this, but they had no choice. It's just a game. She already thought that he wouldn't be willing to help. But the Yuan does not refuse to help. It began to suck out the poison, and Lao Ziji didn't understand why in this game, all the sensations felt real. Afterward, Yuan jokingly thanked Ziji for her hospitality, which made her even more embarrassed and asked her not to tell anyone about it. During this time, the guy had already gotten rid of the poison in his body thanks to his friend, and he was feeling great. And if you need help, he is always ready to help in return. It turned out that his help was needed right now because he was also bitten by a snake. In honor of the gratitude, he was willing to mutually help his friend suck out the poison. But the friend was ashamed to show the place behind where exactly he was bitten. At this moment, Lao Ziji and Yuan came out from behind the trees and returned to their team to continue their walkthrough. But what they saw shocked them. The guy made excuses that he was just sucking out poison. Forgetting about the shameful moments, they continued to move on. There are 49 minutes and 13 seconds left on the dungeon timer. Lao Tzu asked why they hadn't encountered any zombies yet, since the dungeon was called Zombie Jungle. But the guy immediately asked her not to worry. If the zombies meet, he will definitely protect her. But Lao Tzu refused his help, because she wouldn't let someone who likes to eat shit protect themselves. The guy began to defend himself verbally and deny it. There was a strange hum from the green liquid behind them. The slimy green liquid formed a large zombie that immediately jumped on one of the team members. They turned out to be swamp zombies that aren't as strong, but are good at surprise attacks. He immediately started biting the guy's head, trying to get to his brain. He screamed in pain and fear. Yuan, undercover, with a katana in his hands, ran to the aid of an ally. With a deft movement, Yuan swiped his katana across the swamp monster's face. One blow managed to chop his head in half. He marveled at the strength of Yuan's punch and how he was able to cut through the zombie with such ease, wondering how it bypassed the zombie's head and only hit the zombie. But Yuan only said with a guilty smile that he had hit his bald spot a little after all. Lao Ziji broke into the conversation, which made the team members pay attention to something important. She pointed to a pile of swamp zombies that were crawling out of their hiding places to attack. Yuan understood that these were just first-level zombies, but you can't take part alone, because players also have to take part. He was ready to fight for his bald head. He tore his shirt right off, ready for revenge. He used his ability. In a matter of seconds, his body grew in mass and muscle, and he became a huge jock. Yuan didn't understand how he did it, but it turned out that he was able to comprehend such an ability because he was a fitness trainer. Several swamp monsters pounced on the guy. He started slashing at the zombies with his weapon. Yuan was very impressed that the system could project people's abilities from the real world and bring them here. After tearing everyone apart, he was ready to fight on. But a second later, it was blown away in an instant. Lao Tzu didn't understand why he had gone from being a huge jock to a lean man. The reason for the transformation was the low level of the player. So after using the skill, he temporarily turns into a thin weakling. Yuan was shocked to use such dangerous abilities just like that. Suddenly, the system announced an additional task for Yuan, which required killing 10 swamp zombies at the same time. And as a reward, he can be given the same ability, which allows him to build muscle in a second. Monsters kept coming out of the swamp. They are usually easy to kill, but the mission requires killing 10 zombies at once, which makes Yuan think a little. Yuan ordered the 2 team members to climb the tree, but the guy thought it was illogical because zombies will also be able to climb. But Lao Ziji interrupted his complaints and ordered him to trust Yuan. Meanwhile, the swamp monsters were getting bigger and bigger. Yuan dared to take the risk and unsheathed his katana. Ninth Thunder Sword. Having swordsmanship, he used electric shock silencing. The katana started to glow from the lightning around it. Suddenly, a series of lightning bolts covered the swamp, passing over all the dead. All the zombies were electrocuted from head to toe. Yuan was satisfied with the result of his electrotherapy. He successfully completed the task, for which he received the ability Growing Muscles. The guys on the team were surprised by Yuan's mental abilities undercover, and how cleverly he came up with the idea of electrocuting the swamp zombies. But suddenly, someone from the swamp grabbed Lao Ziji's leg. It turned out to be a member of their team who was being sucked into the green liquid. Out of fear, Ziji kicked him on the head, sinking him even deeper. The guys felt awkward about this situation. The girl admitted her mistake. But in her defense, he was no different from them. He was almost killed by his own allies, and it was all her fault. Lao Ziji took this as a compliment, which made him even angrier. She still threw all the blame on him because it was unwise to use such a dangerous ability. Yuan distracted them from their argument and pointed at something. The system has reported the final dungeon boss appearing, which will appear any minute now. It turned out to be the boss of the depths, and Yuan asked the team to be careful while already standing in a combat position. A boss appeared from the portal, a swamp corpse flower that looked like a plant, but with a demonic grimace and a long tongue. The guy was already ready to deal with the swamp master using his muscle augmentation ability, but the guys immediately dissuaded him from this idea. He didn't understand why, but Yuan explained about the dire consequences of using it, so it was worth fighting slowly and from afar. But in any case, all the new players had only melee weapons because firearms and ammunition were not cheap. Yuan hurried to cheer them up, grabbing his coat. Opening the inside, there was a mass of firearms for everyone to choose from. The guys didn't expect such a pleasant turn of events. At this time, the dungeon boss was getting closer and closer despite the shots being fired directly at him. Lao Ziji tried to hold the monster down with her pistol, but her ammunition was absolutely not enough for such a massive monster. After dismantling Wu Yuan's powerful weapons, they took part in defeating the boss. Luckily for Yuan, shooting games are quite popular, so these guys might come in handy. If they continue like this, the boss will be defeated quickly. But Lao Ziji noticed that despite shooting directly at him, the boss didn't lose a single drop of blood. All the damage they dealt during this time was instantly restored to his health line. Presumably, this could be a simple bug. But the answer was much simpler. This boss likes to eat dead bodies that were already scattered around. That is, the boss, eating the dead bodies of swamp zombies, restored his health points. Lao Ziji had lost the point of fighting, but all she had to do was wait until they were over, and she could continue shooting, according to Yuan. But his explanation was interrupted by an attack from one of the boss sprouts that rushed to grab Chi-Ji. He grabbed Ziji and held her close while she complained that she didn't want to die at the hands of the plant. The guys decided to urgently save the girl from the hands of a monster. Monster sprouts began to bind her body more and more as she waited for rescue. But the guys decided to find any reasons to watch it longer. The girl was very angry with them and realized that she could only rely on herself. Pulling out her rifle, she fired at one of the sprouts, injuring the monster. Because of the pain, the monster abruptly released the girl, and she assumed that she would die due to falling from such a height. But Yuan caught it neatly. All of a sudden, the monster's sprouts appeared from behind Yuan, but that was exactly what he had planned. Turning around, he cut through the tentacles with his sharp sword. The monster began to bleed and scream in pain. This angered the boss so much that he started yelling at an unrealistic volume. The guy's level was too low to withstand such an attack. They could only cover their ears. But the level of the Yuan was several times higher than the boss's level, and such an attack did not work on him. After attacking the monster, he used the electric sword ability, only with a double strike. After sticking his katana into the ground, Yuan wished the monster a good death as the lightning bolts worked their way through the loose surface. Upon reaching the boss, the current immediately grabbed its body, causing it to die in agony. Fried by the electricity, the flower fell in defeat. Yuan was proud of himself as usual, praising that this two-level boss was nothing to him, and he didn't even need to try hard. At this moment, the flower was paralyzed after Yuan's final attack. But suddenly, one of the sprouts started to move again. The system reported that the player's behavior angered the boss, which led to its mutation. The dungeon boss has now risen to the 4th level. The guy was happy because for the mutant boss, they can get more rewards. But his friend disappointed him, not knowing if they can even beat him. Yuan didn't expect this to happen. He should have been electrocuted. Lao Ziji put on her glasses and reported the information from the Pokemon book. The ground can block electricity, which blocks the attack and deals much less damage. And this time, you should use fire abilities. Yuan only took off her points, which were created due to additional settings, for which she could easily get banned. At this moment, the enhanced boss spat green poison right out of its mouth. Yuan was able to deftly turn away, marveling at the monster's new tricks after the mutation. The acid that fell from the monster's mouth began to corrode even the stone. Yuan noticed this and immediately warned his team not to touch this liquid. Just as he turned to look at his allies, they were already covered in the monster's slime. Then he heard shouts for help from behind him, and he turned to check on Lao Ziji. But it turned out that the flower's slime also got on her, eating away at her clothes. She is very disgusted by the feeling of this poison on her skin. While taking off her coat, Yuan wanted to help clear her of the slime, but she shouted for Yuan to be careful. A couple of blobs of poisonous slime flew at Yuan, but he managed to react and cut the flying pieces with his katana. One clot managed to get on my arm. If he can still take it, others will die from the pain while he fights. But then one of the allies found a solution to the problem. He admitted that in real life, his career was as a chemistry teacher, and what he got was chemical synthesis. Its main ability is to create new things from the chemical properties of two objects. He has a bottle of gasoline and a piece of cloth in his hands, and he can use his abilities on them. By combining these two items, he will receive a Molotov cocktail. Yuan took the cocktail out of his hands, disappointed that it was only a combination of two items, and his abilities were useless. Since the electricity doesn't work on this monster, Yuan decided to try fire. He swung and threw a Molotov cocktail straight at the monster's face. When touched, the cocktail instantly exploded. The terrifying monster burst into a huge fire, screaming in pain. The system happily congratulated the team on defeating the boss of the depths, and now it's time for the rewards. Each player received a chest. The bald guy was given a gift of strong protein, which increases muscle strength, and it can also be used in combination with abilities. His friend was given a silver breastplate, which is very strong protection, even from bullets. But his appearance confused the guy a little. Lao Jiezi was presented with an ability book that grants a single fatal hit to the head. After using it, the power of the next bullet will increase by 300%. Yuan opened his chest with interest to see what reward was waiting for him. After opening, the chest instantly lit up and stars began to fly out of it, which meant about the legendary reward. All the guys were looking forward to the opening with great anticipation, but all they gave him was a multicolored egg. Even the description did not give details, only the possibility of deduction. Yuan was upset that they only gave him an egg for his hard work. 3 days have passed. Due to the good results of the game, the system announced permission to register new players. The Dark Moon hideout has been filled with new players. People were happy that they were able to enter the game and looked around, praising the hyper-realistic game. Fans also started noticing Lao Tzu and asking for tips on how to get up quickly. Ziji just handed the fan the tools and sent him to cut down trees and weed the ground. Surprised by the professionalism of his favorite blogger, the player ran with wild enthusiasm to do the dirty work. Players actively worked to get a new level and improve their equipment as soon as possible. Wen concluded that the new people worked faster than the previous ones, so the shelter's repairs are even faster. Yuan knows that the shelter will only become more popular and the next people will work even more efficiently. Meanwhile, the system shows 80 players in the shelter and small improvements in different categories. But the arrival of new people has led to an oversupply of labor, so it would be a good idea to open new bases. Hearing these words, Yuan really understood that if there was only one shelter in the game, people would get tired of playing, let alone calling new players, so it was vital to add new ones. Yuan asked if there were bases around the Dark Moon shelter that could be occupied. Wenwen's response was positive, but they were all occupied by zombies. All of them are located on the territory of the central settlements, which does not give the right to just pick them up. To do this, you need to set permissions on them. It turned out that after the crisis, the authorities lost their rights and the territory was divided into the management of different villages. All control was taken by the people of the main forces, which in those parts are called Cottonmouths. They are the best of the awakened ones. But Yuan was not afraid of this because if they wanted to expand their territory, they would have to fight. At this moment, Zunuo burst into the room, having warned about the team that the central settlement had sent to collect taxes. Wenwen was afraid, but Yuan felt confident and ready to meet them. The tax inspector and his security detail arrived at the shelter, and according to the law, he is required to collect 50% of the products every month. The former fugitives of Dark Moon Farm rebelled against the taxmen, because when they needed help, they all didn't care. But the man from the central settlement did not stand on ceremony and took out a pistol from his pocket, intending to shoot. He fired a shot, but he hadn't expected this. A guy with a silver breastplate stood up to defend the settlement, covering the bullet with it, asking first for permission to collect taxes, since he decides to cripple his people for them. The bullet hit the ground after the collision. The taxman doesn't understand how his bullet didn't penetrate his chest. The farmer immediately thanked the guy for his help and worried if he was injured. He only surprised them by showing off his new armor. The players looked at him in horror. Finally, the Yuan arrived at the scene. The past situation didn't affect him in any way, so he still has the audacity to ask Wu Yuan to pay him a small tax to keep his people safe. But as Yuan knew, when this farm was occupied by the hungry wolves, a signal for help was sent to the central settlement. But no one helped them. The taxmen awkwardly explained that their army was already in a tight spot. But now they were here. Yuan couldn't stand the impudence of these people and threw the accusation right in the taxmen's face. They weren't there when they needed help, but now they've come to collect taxes. After his words, the taxman and his guards raised a firearm in their direction, ready to threaten for refusing to pay. As he aimed, he threatened to shoot a couple of bullets at them if they didn't pay. They had the best equipment in the area, in their opinion. Yuan didn't even raise an eyebrow at this behavior, mocking his gun and people. Just by snapping your fingers, an army of armed and equipped fighters appears behind the leader. The taxman's heart sank at the sight of so many guns, and he was shocked. All the players immediately started bragging about their achievements, for which they received their weapons. Realizing that they wouldn't win this fight, just not now, the taxman tried to run away. But Yuan doesn't just let go of those who shot at his people. Once he's put a bullet in his man, he's ready to return the bullet. At these words, the taxman turned red with fear. At the same time, Yuan fires a well-aimed bullet at the right spot. With the help of his guards, he hopped up on one leg, simultaneously managing to threaten. All the players were alarmed and wanted to punch him in the face. Wenwen was afraid of the consequences of such treatment of people from the central settlement, and maybe it was worth cooperating with them. But if Yuan surrendered to them, the people would turn against him, and even if they cooperated, they don't have enough supplies to feed everyone. Juno noticed that the newcomers were very brave when facing the people from the center, but Yuan understood that their courage was only in the game, and in real life they wouldn't do anything. The action moves to the central settlement. Fush, one of the ringleaders, is surprised by the taxman's story after visiting the Dark Moon shelter, because they not only refused to pay, but also dared to attack him. If they attacked the taxman, then they can also have an eye on the leader. There was some truth in what he said, Fush thought. The man knelt down in front of his leader and asked him to teach a lesson to the guys who had harmed him. Fushi confirmed that he had heard of Zhou Yuan's name and exploits. The leader wanted to visit him, but you can't come empty-handed. The taxman, wiping the sweat from his brow, immediately prepared to comply with the request in order to raise the gift to them. But it turned out that Fush had already found an idea for a surprise. It was the head of the civil servant himself. Just as Fush had touched the man's forehead with his finger, a snake pierced his head like a sharp arrow. The Dark Moon hideout is a couple of days away from the fair. Everyone started to prepare their wares. Players started selling weapons, armor, and equipment. Trying to sink the others' trade, they had arguments. Meanwhile, Yuan was looking down at his hideout with binoculars in his hands. He noticed that the square is getting bigger with the arrival of new people. Yuan opened the system to check the shelter's stats. She reported that there were no supplies left at all, and the shelter's productivity had decreased, making people unhappy. Due to the rapid growth of residents and players, they need more space and more shelters. Trouble is unavoidable. Suddenly, a fancy car pulls up to Dark Moon at high speeds. All the people were paying attention. Fush gets out of this car with the best man girl holding a box in her hands. He decided to immediately introduce himself to the people as the manager of the Central Center and that he wanted to see Zhou Yuan. People were hostile after the last visit, so they were ready to attack. Fuchs was not taken aback and immediately apologized for his subordinate's behavior. And in honor of that, he would like to demonstrate the consequences. He turned to the girl named Tang Ya. Opening the box, it contained the taxman's head, with a hole in the forehead. His face was frozen in a grimace of horror. People froze in shock, not understanding if this person was a positive character. Yuan appeared, greeting the guests and offering to discuss whatever was needed in the study. Fuchs had heard about Yuan's grand plan, and he liked it very much. Turning to Tang Ya, he asked her to guard the entrance and make sure to report to him if necessary. The girl accepted the order. They went into an office with a large desk. Meanwhile, the players were watching the girl outside who was protecting the door to the room. One was surprised at how well-developed NPCs were in this game, while others simply evaluated it. Lao Ziji immediately decided to take action and start a conversation with her. After all, this is just a game, and the guys are still afraid to approach. Chao Yi grabbed her shoulder, stopping her from doing so. But her courage was through the roof, and she also had a great ability to flirt with girls. She walked up to Tang Ya, pinning her against the wall, offering to go with her to her room, show her her large and comfortable bed. Tang Ya was not at a loss, and with a smirk, she suggested to defeat her first, and after that, she would be completely at her disposal. The players blushed at such a blatant offer, wanting the same thing. Lao Ziji began to flex her fists, preparing to win. The case moves to the office where Manager Fuchs and Lord Yuan are negotiating. Yuan was interested in the reason for the Central Settlement manager's visit. He decided not to stand on ceremony and immediately reveal all the cards. He was very interested in their shelter, and if Yuan sold him the territory, the price could cover the cost of a lifetime, and he could also live in the most favorable area. But Yuan only scoffed at the state of the Central Settlement, calling it hell. Fuchs only recognized it as a paradise for people like them. As long as they have the power, money, and women will always be there. Yuan doesn't have to worry about all the bugs. Fuxi will take care of them himself. The Lord smiled and called the offer attractive, which immediately amused Fuxia. But unexpectedly, Yuan immediately rejected it in an aggressive manner. Fuxia was taken aback by his refusal and suggested that the reason for this was the decline in his reputation. Yuan just loved freedom and wasn't ready to lock himself up in the Central Settlement forever. The manager has already encountered such people and wants to show what has become of them. But Yuan refuses, because they can still make a deal between them. Fuchs listens intently. On one of the trade routes of the Central Settlement, an organization called the Vulcan Gang operates. Robberies of this gang lead to heavy losses of the center. It turned out that this group had captured a metallurgical plant, which was never recovered, even after several military expeditions. Abruptly, Yuan stabbed his dagger into the map. The deal was that Yuan and his men would deal with the Vulcan Gang, saving the center's trade routes, and they, in turn, would no longer bother them. Fuxi did not believe in victory and asked what if they failed to complete the task. For failing, Yuan is willing to give him the shelter just like he wanted. That is, in both cases, he wins. Fuchs was interested in these terms because the deal is profitable. After getting the necessary papers, after signing, it will be officially concluded. After signing, Fuxi was about to leave the office, waiting for positive news from the Yuan. But at that moment, Yuan heard a shout from the street. Looking out into the courtyard, he saw Tang Ya throw away half of the players who wanted to compete with her. Fuxi was concerned, but Tang Ya convinced him that this was just a game. Because of Team Yuan's disgrace, Fuchs doubted the success of their attack on the Vulcan Gang. But Yuan wasn't worried, because his people are like a crowd of stray dogs, ready to break the bones of anyone for survival. Fuchs, after a successful deal, left the shelter. While driving, the manager decided to ask Tang Ya how these rednecks had performed, but she didn't see all of them, and the ones who fought her were just trash. But she was still surprised by their fearlessness, even at the risk of their lives. Fuxi is sure that it is such people who die first, so the loss of the Yuan was guaranteed. The boys recovered from their fight with Tang Ya. Yuan announces a new limited-time event for which all participants can receive a reward. The guy didn't understand how an event differs from a dungeon, but Yuan explained that in this task, enemies do not respawn and you can get points for them. Also, for every 3 kills, you can get additional rewards. Lao Ziji was the very first to run the event when she heard about the awards. Yuan tried to stop her, because he hadn't finished the announcement yet, but she didn't listen because again she wanted to be the first and get all the awards. However, she was running in the wrong direction. Juno ran over to Yuan, warning him about the power of the Vulcan Gang, and worried that they might not be able to handle it. Yuan, on the other hand, was confident in his men, and she didn't understand where he got so much confidence from. He decided to explain. He compared his people to 4 natural disasters. Meanwhile, at the Vulcan gang, an elderly woman begged for the life of her daughter, offering all the remaining crystals that she has. But the two of them didn't care. He didn't need them, and he knocked all her crystals out of his hands in one fell swoop. One of them started pouring gasoline on a poor little girl who was begging her mother to save her. Taking out the fire, they began to blackmail the mother to tell about the location of the jewelry, or she would have to watch her daughter die. She started bowing on her knees, banging her head on the floor, begging them to let them go, because she really didn't have any money. Realizing that she wouldn't say anything, he gave the order to set the fire. A woman with her forehead smashed on the floor screamed in frustration, and so one of the ghouls released Ognevo. The girl snuggled closer to her stuffed animal. But then, someone grabbed Ognevo right in the air. It was an undercover Yuan who lit a cigarette between his lips with fire. He was upset by the waste of such important resources on burning people and assumed that this person was from the Vulcan gang. The ghoul scoffed. Because they are going to burn everything here to the ground. Lao Ziji was about to attack, and out of the two, she chose a target with a rooster's head. Angry at the girl for insulting her hairstyle, the guy took out a flamethrower. For this, he promised to burn it, releasing fire from a cannon. Fire covered Ziji's body, and she began to scream in terror and pain. The ghoul took delight in burning the girl and began to do good to Lord Vulcan. Yuan reminded her that she was just a gambler, and that this wasn't true. Chiji remembered that even if she was bleeding, she didn't feel that much pain, even though her HP was gradually decreasing. The ghoul couldn't understand how vulnerable she was to his fire. The girl decided to use this as an advantage. With a running start, the burning Ziji leapt at the bandit. He lit up from his own move, rolling on the ground in a ball of pain. After a scuffle, his hair was left bald. He didn't understand what they were trying to achieve. Even if they killed him, the gang wouldn't calm down. But Yuan wasn't going to kill him. And they got him? The boys took him to their Dark Moon hideout. After tying him up in a chair, he started to panic, not understanding what they wanted from him. Yuan only wanted to get information about the Vulcan gang from him. And if he wanted to live, he had better cooperate with them. But the boy wasn't going to say anything because he was loyal to his master Vulcan, and under his protection, he wasn't afraid of anything. Suddenly, someone lit up the end of a metal stick. Xiaoyi held a stick in his hands, threatening him with fire. But even shaking with fear, he claimed that all members of the gang undergo a special baptism. And from the iron burn, he will not be anything. But Xiao Yi didn't intend to burn it. It turned out that his plan was something else altogether. He was going to stick this stick in one place, which would just turn his intestines to mush, and he looked pretty convincing. The ghoul quickly gave up and burst into tears like a child, agreeing to tell everything. Xiao Wei expected this as he tossed the stick aside. When they reached the group, they all stood at attention, shaking from the brutality of their ally. Yuan was impressed by his ways of threatening and eliciting information, and asked if he had learned it in games or movies. But Xiao Yi replied without any emotion in his voice that he was in Afghanistan. Yuan hadn't expected such a response. Thinking about it, he realized that such a person should never be missed. The shivering, burned ghoul asked if they would let him go once they had extracted the necessary information. The wings behind Yuan's back spoke for themselves. They weren't demons after all. Of course they would let him go right away. After answering, the ghoul began to talk. Their leader is called Vulcan, and he is a pyromaniac, and every year he burns and kills more. And his hobby is to watch people burn down. The guys liked the villain's story, which gave them even more motivation to clean his face. Yuan clarified the amount of jewels that his leader could collect in such a long road of killing. The ghoul had only heard of a large amount of gold. Yuan followed close behind and asked where it was. He didn't have an answer to that question. No one could find all of Vulcan's earned wealth, but Yuan was already anticipating the taste of money. He imagined being bathed in gold at the end of the task. Xiao Yi threatened and asked for information about the Vulcan gang itself. Their gang consists of more than 100 people, and each of them has equipment that has something to do with fire. Also, their territory is covered with mines, which complicates the task. After hearing this information, Xiao Yi realized that attacking from the outside directly wouldn't work. So Yuan realized that it would be necessary to attack from within. Yuan decided to make the ghoul take them with him when he returned to the base. Ghoul explains that everything is not so simple, and not everyone can stand joining a gang and endure the baptism of the volcano. Yuan asked me to describe it in more detail. The ghoul said that fire burns the hand, so not everyone can stand it. After passing this test, you will get the right to join. The guys were disappointed in him because this test is more like a child's babble. They couldn't believe that a grown man was afraid of such a thing. The ghoul was horrified by their coolness. The action moves to the volcano gang. Yuan, taking Lao Ziji and Xiao Yi with them, went to the volcano gang and said that they had heard about the gang and would like to join. In front of them, Vulcan himself sat on a throne, wearing a metal mask. He clarified whether they know about the terms of entry. They responded energetically that they would burn their lives out for him. Vulcan asked who was going to go first. Since Yuan wasn't a player, he felt the pain differently, so he decided to go first. He placed his hand firmly on the table, wanting to prove his sincerity to them. A man with a flamethrower in his hand said that not everyone can pass the test. At the same time, he began to spray fire on Yuan's hand. He didn't feel any pain or heat at all, but he felt confident. With a smirk, he mocked this impossible test. This angered the guy with the flamethrower, and he decided to teach him a lesson by launching double the power of the cannon. Suddenly, Yuan reported that he felt it. The man with the gun began to rejoice in his power and begged to beg for mercy so that the hand would not burn to the end. Yuan only enjoyed the process with a happy smile. All the people admired his self-control and the fact that he enjoyed the baptism of the volcano. After finishing the process, there wasn't a single mark on Yuan's hand. Ziji realized that Yuan had simply turned off pain in the settings, and it was her turn. She took a firm step, assuring me that she would do anything to join the gang. The man relaunched the fire cannon and aimed it at Ziji's hand. At the same time, she fell to the ground with a burning hand, seemingly dying of pain. The leader ordered her to stop yelling and let the next one pass the test. She put out her hand and went back to the guys she'd been praising her acting for. Yuan felt that she was overdoing it, while Qiao Yi felt that they were both overdoing it. It was the former Special Forces soldier's turn. He ordered the test to begin. The man with the gun was already beginning to wonder if any of the three of them were normal. The fire was lit, and the test began. Qiao Yi's face twisted in pain, but he didn't pull his hands away, nor did he make a sound. Vulcan announced that all three of them had passed the test, and congratulated them on joining the gang. Yuan and Ziji praised Qiao Yi's acting. It turned out that he just didn't turn off the pain to get such a realistic result. Vulcan's mentor named Shang Wen walked up to them. After congratulating them on joining, he decided to offer them a task that would allow them to contribute to the gang. Yuan decided to accept this opportunity to show the dignity of all three of them in front of the gang. Ziji immediately decided to accept the task from her mentor without discussing it with the team. Yuan was surprised by her quick response. The mentor informed them that their mission consisted of intercepting an important cargo vehicle sent from the center, and the cargo inside it was extremely important to Vulcan's gang. Yuan hesitated, because there were only three of them. It wouldn't be enough for such an important task, but they also understood this. So, together with them, their elite squad will go on a mission. The cargo must not be missed in any case. Yuan assured them that they would not let their leader and mentor down. After accepting the task, the guys walked around the gang's territory discussing the events on the test. Ziji was incredibly proud of her acting skills, but Qiao Yi felt that it couldn't be that simple. Yuan was glad that now they could do what they had planned, and there was no need to worry. It was just a game. At that moment, a strange jar fell to the ground. Lao Ziji immediately picked it up, not understanding what it was. Yuan's heart sank when he noticed this. Qiji remembered that it was the liquid that Yuan rubbed into his body in the shower. Yuan blushed because she was watching him take a bath. He knew that because he felt a strange chill, and Qiao Yi remembered feeling the same way. Ziji immediately started to deny it with a red face. After all, she was just passing by. Yen started to explain that it was just sunscreen, but Ziji didn't believe him, because why would he need it in the game? But he immediately came up with an excuse, saying that it improves the equipment. She immediately wanted to use it. Yuan clutched the jar in his hands, not wanting to share such an important, precious thing, knowing that it was actually a fire-resistant cream that he had bought through the System Points exchange. Since he is not a player and his body is not dead, he cannot control the level of pain he receives. So, for the test, he had to buy such a thing. Suddenly, a crowd appeared in front of him, with a guy named Hyogo leading the way, who had joined the gang before them. Yuan immediately decided to ask for advice, but the guy wanted to admit something else. Immediately shaking hands with Yuan, he was deeply impressed with how he passed the tests. His perseverance reminded Kogo of the princes of ancient times. Yuan pretended to be pleased by these words. He reported that the car was already served, and it was time to go on a mission. Not letting go of Yuan's hand with bright eyes, they went to intercept an important cargo transport. Mentor and Vulcan watched the departure from the rooftop, suspecting that these new guys were spies sent by Fushi. The mentor also suspected this, which is why he sent them on a cargo-related task to immediately look at their behavior. Vulcan was already ready to torture with fire those who wanted to deceive him. The boys found themselves at a transfer point in the middle of a wasteland. The team ordered 4 cups of bull-eyed noodles. It was Hogo who decided to share a unique dish with his new friends. At the sight of this, everyone's appetite abruptly disappeared, and they decided to offer him to eat first. While eating noodles with eyes, Hyogo reported that the right cargo is being delivered through this point, and the target should appear any minute. Yuan clarified that the cargo will definitely be guarded, so a shootout is not the best option. But Hogo had thought of that too, asking the brothers to lay mines on the road so that when they worked, there would be a convenient opportunity to attack. Just by looking at it, Chao Yi said all its parameters, along to the diameter. Hyogo was surprised by his knowledge and wanted to use it to teach the blockheads from the settlement a lesson. But then they reported that the caravan was approaching and a military car was passing along the road. Yuan and Chao Yi were surprised at how well she was armed. At this moment, a boy jumps out in front of the car chasing his ball. His mom screams for him to stop, but it was already too late. The boy was under the wheels of a huge truck. Ziji came running to help, pushing the boy out from under the huge car. She didn't continue her move, destroying everything in her path. The stall owner tearfully said goodbye to his business. One of the guys was annoyed that someone's garbage almost dirtied the car with an important cargo. His words angered Ziji to the core. It was Ning Ti, Fuchsia's subordinate, who didn't care about other people's lives. The girl immediately flared up in earnest, and the case began to smell fried. Ning Tai was surprised by this girl's courage and decided to test her for resilience with his gun, choosing which part to shoot off. At this point, Yuan intervened, introducing Ziji as his slightly silly girlfriend, and in compensation, decided to cover their food expenses for today. Ziji immediately started to get angry at all of his words, but Yuan ordered her to be quiet so as not to make the situation even worse. He was in a good mood, so he decided to let them go, happy that he could eat his fill today. Wen and Kyo Yi made sure that everything was ready for their plan. Ning Ti sat down at the table covered with various kinds of food, hoping that after a successful trade, Mr. Fush would thank them handsomely. Yuan was satisfied with the combination of circumstances, but someone tapped him on the shoulder. It was Commander Ning Ti. Yuan asked, what was the matter with the cute face? He only said that the food was really delicious, but Yuan himself was too timid to protect his girlfriend, so he should not go outside. Yuan immediately agreed with Ning Ti's words, because the commander's word is law. When he was full, he ordered everyone to get in their cars. The truck drove on. Immediately, Yuan radioed to announce the shipment's departure. The driver of the car complained to the commander of abdominal pain. Ning Tai was immediately angry that his driver had eaten too much. And at that moment, the tire hits the first of the mines, which immediately explodes. From an unexpected explosion, the car flips over and falls on the road. Ning Tai climbed out of the window, covered in wounds, not understanding who dared to attack them. From the pile of dust and sand, Yuan, Qijie, and Chao Yi appear. But the more the dust dispersed, the more people appeared behind Yuan. He ordered Commander Ning to set out. Ning Tai was dissatisfied with their attack and started threatening their leader. Yuan immediately recognized Fuchsia's leader and ordered them to hand over the goods to keep them alive. The commander was surprised by the impudence of Yuan, who does not even know what kind of goods he requires. Yuan listed the possible list of goods in the truck with a smile on his face. Ning Tai ordered his team to prepare for battle. They immediately readied their guns. Hyogo was surprised by the number of firearms. It turned out that their product was the weapon itself. Smuggling was a serious crime, as Ning Ti naturally knew. After a short time, the commander started firing. Yan fell to the ground, taking cover from the bullets. Hiding behind the shelter, Yuan started yelling at Hyogo to hide too, not understanding what he was doing. Hyogo doused himself with burning liquid, taking it as a test from Lord Vulcan. And with this, he wanted to prove his faith. All the members began to follow suit as well, pouring fire in honor of the volcano. Hyogo started walking towards the enemy soldiers, ignoring their resistance. They started marching toward the gunfire, following Hogo. Ning Tai's army was trying to fight off the madmen, but they kept going, ignoring the shots. Everyone got to the right distance and began to cling to the soldiers, burning them alive. Ning Tai was disappointed in his incompetent army, still trying to shoot back. But to his regret, at that moment, he suddenly had a stomachache. Yuan was glad that his plan had worked out as it should. At the same time, he activated the muscle augmentation ability and lifted a huge boulder in his hands. He threw a rock right at the head of the soldier who had run him over. Ning Tai was crawling on his knees because of the pain in his stomach that was caused by the poisoned food. The work of Yuan. Pulling out his katana, he only scoffed at his own cunning, because in war, all means are good. Ning Ti knew that his firearm would be several times faster than a katana. The commander started shooting at Yuan, but with sharp movements, Yuan cut through all the bullets. Then, he threw the katana towards Ning Ti. The sword knocked the gun out of Ning Ti's hands, causing him to be stunned. The gun landed right in the hands of the smiling Yuan. Having received the gun, he immediately shot off the head of the commander. The gun was indeed more accurate and faster. All of Fuchsia's soldiers were burned alive after setting themselves on fire and giving themselves a volcano name. Their deaths might raise doubts, so Chao Yi offered to bring them the weapons they had obtained, which would help them regain their trust. But it was a pity for Ziji to give such good equipment to Vulcan's gang just like that. Yan knew that this way, they would only help the gang, even though their goal was completely different. Chao Yi only thought of one way to get the weapons without arousing suspicion in front of Vulcan's gang. Yuan immediately understood what he was talking about, and he knew that it was a logical decision. Ziji didn't understand the plan. At this moment, Qiao Yi put a gun to his head, relying on his buddies. With one bullet, he shot himself in the head. Qiji and Yuan returned to the Vulcan gang with the corpses of the soldiers and Qiao Yi. Both began to mourn the deaths of their allies. Vulcan was surprised by slapping Yuan on the shoulder, and since they came back alive, it proved that they were strong, so they were assigned as the main part of Vulcan's gang. Yuan bowed and promised to do everything for the gang, happy in fact that their plan had worked out so well. In the forest continued to shoot zombies. Juno was killing the dead, wondering where Zhou Yuan might have gone without saying anything. But then, a huge, terrifying zombie appeared behind her. Turning around, she was surprised at the presence of level 2 zombies in such an area. With a single kick, he knocked her several meters away, causing Shu Nuo to fall to the ground. Surprised by this, she pointed the gun at the monster. But suddenly, a woman's voice was heard from above, and an unknown girl jumped on the monster with an axe. With one blow, she took down the zombie. Juno asked who she was. The girl introduced herself as Su Ruoqin. She was a gambler. Things were scattered by the river. While the girls were taking a bath in the river, Su Ruoqin marveled at the realism of the game, even down to the taste of the food. Juno grabbed it, praising the realistic touch as well, but at that moment, the top of her bathing suit unfastened and flew under the water. She immediately dived in, trying to find it. Exhausted, she rejoiced at her success in the search, but something made her uneasy. It turns out that on the riverbank, Yuan was standing undercover, which also wanted to take a bath, but did not notice the girls until this moment. Ruoqin immediately covered her face in shame, but he immediately rushed to reassure her, introducing himself as Zhou Yuan, because he recognized her. They used to work together. The girl didn't believe it. To prove it, Yuan used transformation to bring his body back. She recognized him immediately, and he hadn't expected her to play this game. But at this moment, Yuan's head was hit by a piece of wood, mistaking him for a pervert. He lost consciousness. After a while, he woke up to see two girls above him. He lay on Ruoqin's lap, trying to remember what had happened. Shu Nu awkwardly apologized for the situation that she thought he was the wrong person. Yuan assured her that even if he did, he wouldn't have attacked her. For such words, Shu Nu began to choke him, demanding an apology. After that, Yuan started to warm up a bit, because there was no time to waste. He had to go back to the shelter and announce something important. He gathered people in the main square of the shelter, waiting impatiently to see what would happen. Here comes Yuan, with the happy news that thanks to several players, the Volcano Gang map is now open, including the land and layout. And besides, they had purchased a large amount of equipment at a cheap price. But the bald guy knew that they had far fewer players than the opposing gang, so they needed a plan before attacking. But Yuan was quick to tell them that those players who participate in the capture of the Vulcan Gang will be given 3 extra lives, and even after death, they will be able to instantly revive. Moreover, you can earn a lot of points on this mission. For an ordinary gang member, you get 100 points, and for the boss, you get as many as 1,000. Yuan started registering. People immediately started signing up to participate with full enthusiasm. Ruoqin asked Yuan to register her as well. Yuan tried to talk her out of it, because it was too dangerous and scary. She snuggled up to him, telling him not to underestimate her. He could only agree with her because he was too embarrassed. Ruoqin promised not to tell anyone about his little secret. After a while, Yuan shot into the sky, announcing the start of the mission, ordering everyone to follow him with their weapons in hand. All the players were ready to tear the volcano to shreds. The next day, in the Vulcan Gang, the leader gave out a reward to Ziji and Yuan undercover. After receiving a gold bar each, Yuan thanked his master. But this moment was interrupted by one of the subordinates who warned Vulcan about an approaching group of people with weapons that were going to attack the gang. The mentor began to calm him down, because there are mines all around the territory which they will definitely step on. But the guy had no doubt that they had already managed to pass them without losing a single person. The mentor realized something was wrong. He realized that there were traitors among them, that they had leaked information, and that they were new members of the gang. Ziji scoffed at their stupidity. She immediately confessed her betrayal. Pointing her finger at Vulcan, she ordered him to repent of his sins. She fired and the bullet went straight for the leader. But at that moment, a Yuan came out that flew to save the master. He saved Vulcan from the bullet by taking it with his body. And in time for his flight, he shot back at Ziji to protect Vulcan's honor and the brothers. The bullet hit him squarely in the chest. Falling to the ground, Ziji began to make a heroic speech and trust that her companions wouldn't let them get away with it. She started to bleed, but Yuan stood over her and finished her off with a few more shots. After apologizing for the unexpected betrayal of his partner, he asked for permission to go into battle and prove his loyalty to the leader. The leader placed a hand on his shoulder, thanking him for saving him. He sent him to heal his wounds, because these midges mean nothing to him, and his guys will cope. His attendants brought him a huge hammer. Vulcan took the hammer in his hands, and at the same time it burst into flames. But his mentor stopped him, asking him to think carefully because someone else might be involved. The leader was angry and took the mentor by the collar and asked if he doubted Vulcan. Of course, the mentor immediately denied out of fear. Throwing it on the ground, the leader prepared to leave. The mentor sitting on the ground was displeased with the leader's distrust. Yuan told him that if Vulcan won, he had a chance to survive, but if he was defeated, he would die. The mentor didn't understand how he knew that. Yuan explained that an arrogant person like Vulcan would not be able to withstand defeat, so if he won, he would be laughed at most. The mentor realized that Yuan was absolutely right because the leader is too cruel. Startled, he asked for advice. He also offered to find the leader's treasures and divide them equally, then go their separate ways. The case is transferred to the Battle of the Vulcan Gang and players from the Dark Moon Shelter. The leader ordered to attack. The reward for each enemy killed is 3 crystals. This immediately raised the motivation of his troops, and the gangs began the battle. Ruoqian dealt with her enemies. After tearing the enemy apart, she was very surprised by the realism of the human entrails. But distracted, she was stabbed through from the back with a sword. It turned out to be one of the members of the Vulcan Gang. But the smile immediately faded from his face. After dying, Ruoqian was reborn again, just like the rest of the players. The Vulcan Gang members were very scared by this. They thought they were zombies, but the dead can't have that kind of consciousness. While they were discussing this, Qiao Yi came to Ruoqian's aid, shooting the 2 of them in the head. The revived Lao Tzu also fired at the enemies. The gang members did not understand, because they were killed right in front of their eyes. But at that moment, the gang leader arrived, slamming his huge fire hammer into the asphalt. His punch was very powerful, causing the entire earth to shake. While the battle was going on, Yuan and his mentor went to Vulcan's safe, where all the treasures are stored. But even he didn't know the code for it. It turned out that Yuan had a key. The mentor did not understand because the safe has a combination lock. Taking out the explosives from his pocket, all questions disappeared. He placed the bomb directly on the wall of a thick metal safe. After a couple of seconds, it did its job and exploded. Yuan was happy to be able to take all the gold, and the tutor was happy to open the safe. Looking through the explosive hole, Yuan found that the safe was completely empty. He immediately became angry at his mentor, not understanding why there was nothing inside, but even he didn't know the reason. But he remembered Vulcan's words that he had hidden treasures where no one would find them. After saying this, Yuan pondered and thought of a possible place. They approached the leader's throne, and Yuan took out a dagger. The mentor doesn't understand his ideas. Using the dagger, he began to cut open his throne. After making a hole, he noticed a lot of gold inside, not expecting the gold to be hidden in plain sight. Yuan rejoiced at his genius in finding treasures, but the mentor decided to betray him, pointing a gun at him, intending to kill him. The shots flew into his body faster than he could react. He was able to stand up and look at Yuan. In his hands was a shotgun, which he shot at him. The mentor was too late to commit treachery. All the players were sprawled on the ground in sparks from the fire, having no more respawns. Another man tried to attack the gang leader, but he was instantly crushed by a huge burning hammer. The survivors were Shiji and Qiao Yi, who had their last lives remaining. With such weapons, they didn't stand a chance of defeating the leader, and Ziji couldn't believe that they would have to give up. Vulcan only laughed at his own power, knowing that they couldn't compare to the awakened one. During his taunts, the severed head of the mentor landed under the leader's feet. The leader looked back. Behind him, Yuan sat on his throne of gold. Vulcan was really angry, not only at his betrayal, but also for his gold. Yuan drew his sword, claiming that being an undercover agent was not a betrayal. At the same time, his katana was covered with lightning, and he was about to strike. Jumping off the ground, he leapt at the leader. He raised his hammer to deflect the blow, but the electricity passed through his weapon and hit him with a strong current. The mask cracked and fell from his face. Yuan looked at his face, surprised. His face was completely flushed, which surprised everyone around him. He wasn't a man who could control fire. The volcano flew up into the sky, causing a flaming vortex. Circles of fire began to surround the people. Yuan realized that the volcano was awakened. He was the most successful of the awakened ones, and was the highest form of evolution. The volcano began to cover Yuan with fire. Qiji cautioned that the damage from such a powerful attack would be too high, causing Yuan to die. But Qiao Yi was sure that he wouldn't be so easy to kill. The leader started blowing up and setting Yuan on fire with huge flames. In the distance, a figure suddenly appeared in the smoke. It was Yuan who walked out with a calm gait after such an attack, belittling Vulcan. It turned out that he had previously applied a fire-resistant cream, which saved his life. Vulcan said that was just the beginning. Suddenly, he unleashed a huge flame dragon attacking Yuan. He started to draw his katana. Yuan threw lightning strikes one after another, slicing the dragon into pieces. He wanted to attack Yuan again with the dragon, but he was faster. Yuan swung his sword straight at the volcano. He looked around, trying to figure out if he had killed him or not. His body had already become part of the fire element, so he was invulnerable, and normal attacks have no effect. Vulcan slammed his fist right into Yuan's face, sending him flying. A powerful blow takes Yuan several meters away. He lands, bumping his back against the golden throne, coughing up blood from the pain. Due to the fire, the golden throne began to melt, chaining Yuan's limbs to it. Yuan's hands and feet were wrapped in molten gold. Vulcan decided to imprison Yuan in the throne so that he wouldn't escape, since he couldn't kill him. Yuan praised him for his imagination, but disappointed that he wouldn't be able to use the gold. At this point, Yuan launched the system, converting all the gold into system points. The throne began to disappear, and the exchange for points began. Vulcan fell to his knees due to the loss of all the gold. Yuan also thanked him for telling him how to kill him. The hero exchanged 5,000 points for the supreme stage of the ice element, and his sword began to emit cold smoke with ice pieces. Vulcan was willing to expend all of his life force to kill Yuan. Two dragons burst out of his body at the same time, while Yuan was covered in ice. He began to form an ice sphere, doubting the success of the volcano. Suddenly, an ice dragon that was several times larger than the fire dragon appeared from Yuan's hand. With just one bite, the cold dragon destroyed one of the enemies. Vulcan didn't understand how he could lose. The dragon struck at the leader. Yuan recalled his familiar. The volcano was frozen in a pose of terror, covered in a thick layer of ice. It started to crumble into small pieces. The guys began to rejoice at the victory and bless Yuan. He was really tired, and he breathed a sigh of relief. When he finished speaking, he fainted from impotence. 2 days later, he was still unconscious, lying on a bed in the Dark Moon shelter. Ziji and Ruoqun were standing by his bed, waiting for him to wake up. Ziji had an idea. She decided to try killing Yuan and wait for him to revive. Ruoqun couldn't do that. She shouted at Ziji to stop hurting Yuan. After touching it, Chiji noticed that Ruoqun's chest was bigger and wanted to compare it. At this moment, Yuan started to open his eyes. He sat up, watching the strange scene. Yuan said hello. After recovering, Wenwen began to report on matters in the shelter, that they've taken over Vulcan's gang, and that the factory also belongs to them. But the only question that bothered her was what had happened to his face. There were large red marks on his face from 2 slaps. He decided to check if she had sent anyone to the central settlement. Wenwen has only temporarily stopped the news of the Vulcan gang's defeat from spreading, but she doubts that Fush will give up the loot. Yuan praised her for her excellent work, because first they need to rework the entire arsenal of Vulcan before Fush starts a rebellion. She also reported that 2 of the adventurers were missing. She supposed they might have gone to some faraway land where they were hard to watch, but they didn't have time for that. Meanwhile, these 2 guys were sitting in the dungeon, tied to chairs. They didn't understand who had stolen them or what he wanted. A pink-haired girl appeared in front of them, who was surprised at their courage to resist the final evolution and defeat Vulcan. The guys started drooling and thought it was a new NPC. It turned out that the girl was a member of Tianxuan's final evolution, and she likes to hurt other people, and if they don't give information, it will be worse for them. She slapped the boys in the face with the whip she was holding. Tianxuan asked what they felt when they were in pain, but the guys just liked this moment and wanted more. The girl came to a dead end. She didn't understand how they could enjoy such unbearable pain. The guys explained that of course they don't feel so much pain because it's just a game body, praising the NPCs of this game. After their words, she realized that their consciousness had been transferred into these bodies, so it wasn't surprising that they were able to defeat the Volcano Gang. Placing her hands on their heads, she began to use her abilities. She began to suck the memories out of their heads. The boys felt a strange sensation. From this, they were disconnected, and thanks to them, Tianxuan now knows how to get to the Dark Moon shelter. The next day, the shelter was quiet. 2 female players were walking around, discussing game moments. They wanted to go out and look for cute guys. At this moment, the same guys appeared in front of them, only there was already something wrong with them. The girl, not understanding their behavior, slapped one of them in the face, thinking that he was trying to make a pass at her. But she didn't like bald people. The guy suddenly opened his fangs. Abruptly, he started biting the girl, causing her to cry out in fear. He wouldn't let her go and she screamed for help. The second guy ran after her friend, who also ran away, calling for help. Yuan tapped the numbers on the calculator, calculating how much money he could get from the gold he received. His calculations yielded hundreds of thousands of points. Shuno burst into the room, announcing the arrival of these 2 adventurers. She reported that they had turned into zombies. Yuan didn't understand how this could have happened. As he stepped outside, he saw the players take turns turning into zombies, biting everyone in their path. Lao Ziji, who had also turned into a dead man, ran towards him. He didn't understand how players could get infected with the zombie virus and turn to the system. It turned out that it was a virus entering the player's mind. It does not touch the body, but gradually eats away at the brain, which leads to the final loss of consciousness. Meanwhile, in the real world, players whose characters were bitten by zombies actually turned into foaming at the mouth blockheads. Ordinary people didn't understand what was going on. The people wearing gaming glasses suddenly started to fall down, and foam was leaking out of their mouths. According to news reports, more than 100 cases of acute coma have already been recorded in the city. Yuan heard this and hit the wall in a rage. He didn't know what to do now. Yuan didn't know if he could save this 100 people. The only way was to use the power of the system and transfer the real bodies to another world to regain consciousness. That is, players really have to come to the game world to come to life. But the system says that such a rescue of so many people will require a lot of points, without giving anything in return. So you should think carefully. Yuan understood that this was only his responsibility for what had happened, and he had to do it. The system calculated the total number of points needed, and the amount came out to 12,000. The system persistently did not recommend accepting this task. But Yuan only apologized because he wouldn't refuse. He clicked on the yes button, accepting the task. The system has once again become disillusioned with people. But for Yuan, this was the true greatness of humanity in making such decisions. After spending 12,000 points, the system started moving. People in hospitals couldn't understand what was going on, and bodies started disappearing. All the players began to fall out of reality, moving to another world. On the radio and on the news, they began to repeat about the unknown reason for the disappearance of people who were in a coma. The system reported that all players were moved, and the virus was cured, thinking that the Yuan's goal had been reached. But he knew that the most difficult part was waiting for him next. On the territory of the shelter Dark Moon, a huge number of people lying down appeared. They started to come to their senses, not understanding what had happened. They thought they were back in the game. But something changed. Yuan announced to all people to pay attention to the important news. He shouted that all the players had entered this world for real. Lao Ziji couldn't understand after all, they were only in the game. He regretfully informed them that they would now be unable to leave this world and could no longer return to reality, as they were not players. People tried to leave the game through the system, but nothing worked. One of the girls did not believe his words, putting the muzzle to her temple, because if she dies, she can return to the real world. Yuan tried to stop her, but it was too late and she fired. She fell to the ground. The people around her started to watch, indicating that her corpse wasn't going to disappear and she wasn't being resurrected. A stone was thrown at Yuan, asking him to be released from the game. People started throwing stones at him to get everything back. While they bombarded him with all sorts of things, he promised that, as the patron and culprit, he was ready to take responsibility and find a way to get out of the game. And if it doesn't work out, he's ready to die. Lao Ziji held her hand up, believing his words. She explained that their anger wouldn't change anything. But they were players, and they could handle it. Xiao Yi stood up and suggested that the players not waste their time and find a way to improve themselves and their equipment. People began to agree with their words. They have no other choice. Players began to bombard Yuan with questions about their safety and whether he could protect them. Yuan prepared a defense method while they were unconscious. He loudly ordered them to come out and protect the people. Suddenly, something big started stomping. People were surrounded by huge zombie goons. This immediately scared them, and they tried to defend themselves. The zombie goons bowed their knee in front of Yuan. He called them zombie guards, which he made from the remains of zombies and corpse crystals. They must protect the shelter. People started to trust Yuan, but they still couldn't stop worrying. Suddenly, Yuan ordered the zombies to be released. A huge crowd of dead people started running towards them. People started running away from the zombies, not understanding what Yuan was doing. The zombie guards immediately started hitting the monsters one by one. After destroying everyone, they stood behind the leader. He proved that he could protect them. Night had already fallen. The shelter was protected by a high fence and zombie goons. Lao Ziji was whipping a bottle of alcohol. She was sitting on the roof, and it was obvious that this was not the first bottle. Yuan sat down next to her, marveling at her courage to sit outside at night. A blushing Ziji laughed at his words, encouraging herself to only go forward because tears can't help matters. Yuan thanked Ziji for her support in front of the evil players and promised that he would buy her a drink after quitting the game. She suggested that they not wait for the right moment, but have a drink with her right now, putting off all worries for tomorrow. Yuan supported her idea, clinking bottles together. They planned to get drunk to death. The next day, Yuan was sleeping off a fun night. Someone started banging on his door, telling him something big, threatening to come in. Yuan sat up in bed, complaining of a sore lower back. Juno burst into his room, still shouting about what had happened. She immediately blushed when she saw Yuan without any clothes on. He admitted that he likes to sleep like this, pulling on a t-shirt at this moment. He asked her what was the matter. Juno reported that Fuchs's men had come here again, only now to discuss the distribution of rewards for defeating Vulcan's gang. He dressed and resolutely gathered to discuss the terms that he himself had long wanted to discuss. Fush and his best man were already waiting in the study. The girl complained about Zhou Yuan's long wait. Yuan justified this with a lack of time due to business. She took it as rude of her. Fushi stopped her complaining by addressing Yuan about the destruction of Vulcan's gang. He said that when they made the crossing, the volcano blocked their path. Yuan didn't understand why they were asking him about the Vulcan attack. But in any case, it had already been destroyed, and now a second Dark Moon shelter stood in its place. Fushi came precisely because of this, because after defeating the volcano, Yuan took both the territory and the military factory for himself. Fushi considered this an impudence, because why not give it to the center? But Yuan was angered by Fushi's audacity to ask for so much, wanting to take over everything at once, even though it was Yuan's team that was fighting the volcano. After accepting Yuan's negative answer, a snake appeared on the table in front of the manager. But Yuan only demanded to be offered something in return. He didn't understand what exactly Yuan wanted from him. At the same time, the overlord pointed a finger at the girl behind Fush, his bodyguard, wanting to take her to his place. She didn't understand how he had the right to suggest such a thing. If Fush gives up the girl, he will think about giving up the factory. Fushi didn't expect that Yuan would want to exchange an entire military factory for a girl. Tang Ya was taken aback that her master was considering this proposal. Fush began to reassure her, reminding her that she was willing to sacrifice herself for his well-being. Yan burst out laughing, admitting that it was just a joke. There are enough girls as it is. At this turn, Fush jumped out of his chair, threatening that he didn't come alone. Wen pointed to the street with a sneer. When they got out, the Fush boys were already lying on the ground. He couldn't believe that his elite troops had lost so quickly. Laughing at his elite troops, Yuan reminded him that he was also an elite. Yan advised against encroaching on the Dark Moon shelter. After all, his people had just been wiped out to smithereens. Fush was surprised that Yuan decided to go against him. Fush and Tang Ya started to leave, hinting at their future comeback. They left in their luxury car. Juno didn't know if it was right to let them go like this. Yan understood that Fush was the leader of the central settlement, so killing him was extremely unprofitable, so it was worth keeping a low profile for now. Meanwhile, in the central settlement, a sophisticated, state-of-the-art lock announced successful iris authentication. The doors of the mysterious room opened, revealing a large metal sphere in the middle. She asked where they were going, but Fushi only said that according to his research, everyone has a limit, and Yuan was only so fearless because of his zombie bodyguards. He entered a mysterious secret room while typing something on the keyboard. Fushi pressed a large round button. After that, a huge metal sphere began to open up, emitting green smoke from within. Fush called it research. A zombie-like creature emerged from the sphere, but it had no skin at all, just meat. A large number of soldiers were standing around the open sphere, pointing their cannons at the monster. They all started shooting at the monster at once. But no matter how much you didn't shoot, he didn't really care about the bullets. And as the monster moved forward, it jumped on one person. With a single blow of his fist, the undead zombie chopped the man into pieces. After tearing apart all the soldiers, the monster screamed. Tang Ya was terrified of what was happening. Fush smiled at the success of his research and was happy with the result, because it was a secret weapon, and he wanted to create a whole army of unkillable zombies. In his laboratory, there were an unreal number of flasks that contained exactly the same terrible monsters. When the development of these monsters comes to an end, the Dark Moon shelter will take the first blow. It's been a whole week. Yuan practiced hard, practicing techniques with his katana. A voice interrupted his training session. Behind him was a crowd of people who were asking him to take them into his house, because theirs had become a place of evil. He realized that they were residents of the central settlement and asked what had happened. With tears in their eyes, they said that a mass infection with the zombie virus had begun in the central settlement. We go back a couple of days. It happens in the afternoon, in the alley of one of the houses of the central settlement. Two guys were walking home, both drunk. But their path was interrupted by a huge figure that appeared from behind. The guy turned around in horror. But by this point, the huge zombie was already eating his friend. He ran as fast as he could, trying to find the guards. Tears streamed from his eyes as he tried to understand what was happening. After a while, the houses of the central settlement were covered with fire, and huge zombie titans were walking around the streets, attacking people. He tearfully said that they had managed to escape with God's help, but there were probably still survivors. But Yuan didn't understand why they had turned to him instead of their leader, Fush, who had his own army for such cases. The man immediately shouted that the leader himself was to blame for this virus, and during his experiments with zombies, one of them was killed. And for the time being, Fush hid from the people in his stronghold who had already started a rebellion. The man bowed to Yuan to help save his wife and child who were still in the center. All the people followed him, gradually falling to their knees, asking to save their loved ones. Yuan admitted to the crowd that he was far from a hero and not even a good person, but he didn't even think about leaving them to their fate, and he would definitely find Fusha, proving to him who the true leader was. The The next day, Yuan launched a public speech announcing the tragedy in the central settlement. He announces that he will be assembling a team to save the center and innocent people, and invites everyone to join in. People started to worry and give back, because they are no longer players and their death is too dangerous. Yuan explains that this is not just a problem with the central settlement, and when it falls, the zombies will also reach the Dark Moon shelter. Juno vigorously extended her hand, wanting to participate in the mission. He sneered at her because she wasn't even a gambler. Juno understands that they are all in the same boat and it is worth doing something other than just waiting for death. Kiji, gun in hand, resolutely joins the mission. Ruoqin also agrees. Qiaoyi and Tina also agree to help. This immediately revived the human players, and they all started joining in. Such unity brought tears to Yuan's eyes. Tina laughed at his sentimentality. Even a strong person like Yuan has the right to show leniency. And now, they had already arrived at the central settlement's district. Zombie thugs carried a huge log in their hands, trying to open the big doors with a run. The log opened the center's sturdy doors. Yuan starts the mission. In the central settlement, a complete bacchanal was taking place. All the buildings were on fire, and zombies were running around eating people. One girl was cornered by a zombie. She was trying to call for help, and after she screamed, the zombies shot her in the head. She asked who had saved her, shaking with fear. It was Ziji, who held out her hand with a smile. Yuan's team slaughtered the dead one by one. Guys pulled survivors out of the rubble of buildings. They reached the lab door. The bomb on the door beeped and went off at the same time. A Yuan appeared in the hole. Since the zombies came from here, Fush must be hiding here. Ziji went with him, as the others were busy with the rescue mission. Putting a hand on her shoulder, he advised her to go back to the others because if something happened, he wouldn't be able to help her. She knew what he was going to say. Ziji, before leaving, reminded him of his promise to get people out of this world, which he never forgot. Yuan kicks open the door to the room. When he went inside, he found nothing but huge broken flasks. But suddenly, someone's sharp claws attacked him. He managed to dodge, but the monster looked very familiar to him. It was Fush's bodyguard, Tang Ya. She didn't hear him as she charged again. Yuan fended off her attack with his katana. He was surprised that even Tang Ya was infected with the zombie virus. Realizing that Fush was doing terrible things, Yuan apologized to her because he couldn't stay too long, and she was blocking his way. He once again used his ability on the sword, electrifying it with the Thunder Decapitator. A single strike covered Tang Ya's body with lightning bolts. She was burned and lost consciousness, but did not die. Yuan claims that he only helped her. Through the pain and zombie virus, Tang Ya whispered a request for help. If he was right, then she wasn't fully infected. It turned out that he had the stop vaccine. Then, he summoned the syringe that Tang Ya, whose recovery depended on her, had injected. She came to her senses, not understanding what had happened. He pulled her to him, asking for payment for his rescue. Tang Ya didn't expect Yuan to be the one to save her. She handed him a syringe with a green liquid inside. Yuan didn't know what it was. It turned out to be the same potion that Fush uses to create zombies. He finally went crazy and started experimenting on Tang Ya, but she managed to steal it before she passed out. Yuan didn't understand why he needed it, because this thing would turn him into a zombie. But Tang Ya was sure that someone like him should be able to handle this. But she was worried that he might not be able to beat Fusha. Yan was confident that he would be able to taste the snake soup today. Suddenly, Tang Ya pointed the knife at herself. Yuan immediately shouted, not understanding why she was doing this. Tang Ya believed that Fushi was the savior leader, but she was deeply mistaken. So she felt that she didn't deserve to die for such a mistake. She sent the knife to her throat, but Yuan stopped the blade with his hand. Tang Ya, with tears in her eyes, didn't understand why he was saving her. Yuan claimed that since he had saved her, her life was his, and he wouldn't let her die. He was going to move on, and Tang Ya promised to wait for him to return. All the flasks that previously contained mutant zombies were smashed. Yan set off in search of Fusha. Fush heard footsteps behind him and greeted Yuan, showing the deaths of his residents on the big screen. Yuan recalled that his subjects believed in his idea and life in paradise, but Fush only made their lives hell. Fush turned around, revealing his snake-like face. He said that the more he studied the zombie virus, the more convinced he became that the human body had a limit. Its head detached from its body, turning into a large, long snake. Yuan activated his katana. He immediately attacked the charging snake, slicing it open. The snake's head fell to the floor. Yuan picked up his head, not understanding why it was so easy. But the head in his hands suddenly came to life, and Yuan was startled. It bit into his neck. Its body turned into a huge gorgon snake with many limbs and heads. Fushi attacked Yuan with the snake mouth spear. Yuan realized that after being bitten, his body didn't move. But at this moment, his body was covered by Ziji. The girl took a punch to the gut. Yuan didn't understand what she was doing here. It turned out that she didn't listen to his advice and went after him. The snakes began to escalate, voicing Fuchsia's words. Fuchs once again attacked with the snake mouth spear, while Yuan held the dead Chiji in his hands. But suddenly, something severed all the snake heads. Fuxi hadn't expected this. Yuan poked and injected himself with a potion that turns him into a monster. His arm became huge, and he became a red mutant that was ready to finish off the snake head. Fuchs didn't understand where Yuan got his development from. The mutant Yuan jumped on Fuxia. He grabbed the main head of the snake body. In one fell swoop, he tore it off with his mutant arm, but it instantly grew back, like a new one. He believed that he was the highest degree of evolution. The heads shot poison at Yuan. With his huge hand, he protected himself from the poison. But my hand immediately began to burn. It was a hell of a pain. Fuchs wants to deliver the final blow, wanting to absorb Yuan completely so that he can become a part of it. A huge snake attacks Yuan, intending to eat him. With one bite, he stuffed Yuan into his mouth and swallowed. Yuan was inside the snake, passing through the long body. But that was his plan. Fuxia began to feel his power grow because he was the highest. At this moment, his stomach started to crack. Mutant Yuan's hand pierced through the snake's belly. Organs began to fall out, until Fuchs could not admit defeat to such an inferior creature. With his long arm, he grabbed the snake, wanting to kill it in the same way. He started to absorb the snake in his hand as Fuxia screamed in agony, but the mutant hand gradually stopped listening to Yuan. The virus began to spread further through his body, causing him to lose control of himself. Yuan stuck a huge syringe into his arm to nullify the infection. After the introduction, the arm immediately began to shrink. Yuan fell to the ground powerlessly, glad that it was all over. It's been a few days and Yuan is in the hospital. Yuan is lying in the ward unconscious, his body wrapped in bandages and plaster. He finally started to wake up, which made the girls very happy. Yuan sat up on the bed, not understanding what was going on. Juno reported that after he defeated Fuxi, she and the players dealt with the zombies. And at the moment, repairs are being carried out on the settlements. Looking out of the window, all the inhabitants rejoiced at his awakening and were ready to follow him, thanking him for saving them. Yuan suddenly burst into tears, regretting that Lao Ziji would not be able to see this happy picture. After all, she had sacrificed her life for him. At this point, a slipper lands on the back of his head. It was a disgruntled Lao Jiezi who was holding Tang Ya's hand. With tears in his eyes, he was surprised that she was still alive. But all she said was that they'd agreed to have a drink after the war was over.